You step into a candlelit circle, the hush heavy enough to press against your chest. A voice cracks open the silence, trembling with emotion. Tears glisten in polished eyes as the speaker reveals a devastating personal loss. The air tastes of incense and promise. Your pulse quickens, empathy floods every nerve ending. For a moment you feel a bond so raw it seems unbreakable. It feels real. From our earliest days we crave someone who lets us in. Vulnerability carves a path straight to the heart. When someone bears their wounds, you lean in. You trust them because they risk their dignity. You lower your guard. You hand over your secrets. That trust, once given freely, becomes a bridge between souls. A bridge you're eager to cross. But what if that opening is a trap? Our brains are wired for empathy. Mirror neurons fire when we see pain. A frown, a shaky breath, tears at the corner of the eye. Your mind echoes the suffering as if it were your own. You feel an itch behind your ribs, a longing to soothe, to rescue, to hold. It's a reflex older than language, older than culture. It's the pulse of our social survival. Cult leaders know this better than anyone. They weaponize emotional openness, faking weakness to disarm you. A scripted sob, a rehearsed confession, a timed pause for effect. It all adds up. Behind every tear is a calculation. Each tear is designed to steal your certainty, to blur your reason with sympathy. Fake vulnerability steals trust, and once that trust is in shadow, control follows like a tide. Jim Jones once held mass crying sessions, coaxing followers into collective grief before demanding absolute loyalty. David Koresh confessed unspeakable sorrows in candlelit rooms, then used that shared pain to justify unquestioning obedience. In those moments of communal tears, every eye was fixed, every heart bound tighter to the leader. Those tears were the cost of admission, and the price was your freedom. First you feel compassion, then guilt, then obligation. They fast-forward you through emotional stages like a film spool, cutting out anything that might slow the emotional momentum. You move from witness to accomplice in a single breath. You offer solace and find yourself ensnared. What began as empathy becomes a noose, each knot tied by your own hands in the name of solidarity. Picture a newcomer hesitating at the threshold. The leader steps forward, voice soft, shoulder trembling. They speak of childhood scars and betrayal. You watch them wince as memories surface. Your chest tightens. You step closer. You offer a hand. You lean in. That moment defines your next step inside the group. Your compassion becomes their currency. Your kindness buys their authority. Then comes the pivot. Once they've drained you of doubt, they demand reciprocation. They ask for your darkest fear, your hidden regret, your deepest secret. You comply, eager to prove your bond. And instantly they hold that secret like a dagger over your head. Vulnerability seized becomes leverage, the unseen hook through which they steer your thoughts, your actions, your life. Imagine vulnerability as bait on a fishing line. Soft and inviting, it drifts where you can't resist. You nibble at the edges, drawn by its gentle glow. Then snap, you're hooked. That bait was never yours to claim. It belonged to someone who watched you bite. A sanctuary that turns into a cage once you step through the gates. Cult rituals often center on confessions. You stand in a hushed circle, spotlighted by trust. You spill your shame. You wash away your defenses. In that ritual, you are reborn, yet you are also shackled. Every word you utter becomes part of the ledger they use to measure your devotion. That ledger grows heavier with each disclosure, and each entry dims the light of your own autonomy. Detecting fake vulnerability takes practice. Look for timing that feels too perfect, tears that arrive like clockwork, pauses that hang a beat too long. Notice if the confession is always followed by a demand. Follow me, donate now. Trust me, above all. Observe mismatches between tone and tears, between tempo and emotion. Real vulnerability trembles with uncertainty. Fake vulnerability marches in lockstep. Have you ever watched someone's tears and wondered if they were tears at all? You sensed performance in the quiver of their lip, in the even rhythm of their sobs. You felt it in the way their eyes glistened too brightly, like stage lights catching sweat. That moment hangs in your memory like a question you can't unask. Was I a fool? Fake vulnerability steals trust. It runs on the fuel of compassion and leaves you stranded in the wreckage of your own goodwill. You give yourself away piece by piece until there is nothing left but an empty shell wearing your face. And when you finally see the deception, the wound cuts deeper because you opened the door yourself and invited the thief inside. Trust is sacred. It blooms only where honesty takes root. Fake vulnerability uproots that trust and sells it as something real. You must learn to guard your empathy, to sense when a wound is offered and when it's wielded. Because in a world hungry for connection, those who fake vulnerability will always find prey, and only those who discern the real from the rehearsed can stay free. You slip into a bright room where everything feels just right. The air is warm, the walls are soft colors, and a friendly face greets you with an easy smile. She asks you to do one tiny thing. Just sign your name on a sheet. You lift your pen almost without thinking, and in that moment something subtle shifts inside you. Why did you agree so quickly? It was a harmless gesture, a name on a page, yet that small act set a chain reaction in motion. You signed, you committed, and suddenly you were part of something larger than yourself. That little signature whispered to your brain, "You belong here. You've said yes once. So saying yes again feels natural." This is the foot in the door technique. First you get your foot in, and then you slowly push the door wide open. Cult leaders exploit this trick with surgical precision. They start with tiny favors, a questionnaire, a fleeting compliment, a short video. Each request feels trivial until it isn't. Each yes quietly rewires your sense of who you are. You might think you'd notice, but psychology has a secret weapon called consistency bias. Once you say yes to something small, your mind craves alignment. It hates feeling hypocritical. So when the next ask arrives slightly larger, you're primed to comply. You want your actions to match your past decisions, so you go along again and again. Imagine the first step, a simple survey about your hopes and fears. You scribble your thoughts and hand it over. It feels cathartic, almost therapeutic. You've invested a few minutes, so you begin to care. Then the leader suggests you attend a casual gathering. 2 hours of your evening, no big deal. You say yes because you've already signed on. At that first meeting, the atmosphere is electric but soothing. Candlelight flickers across attentive faces. Stories roll out like comforting waves, stories of transformation, stories of community. You start to believe that maybe, just maybe, this group sees you. You volunteer to stay a bit later, to help tidy chairs. Your small favor cements your bond. Next comes a request to donate $1 each week. $1 feels laughably small. You've already given time and effort. $1 is nothing. You hand it over with a smile. You think you're supporting something meaningful. What harm could a dollar do? But that dollar is another thread in the net drawing you closer. Soon you're asked for more. An hour of your morning each day, a weekend retreat, introductions to your friends. Each favor inflates ever so slightly until you can't remember life before these commitments. Your identity shifts around these actions. You are a supporter, an insider, someone who believes. And then the big ask arrives. Live at the commune, full financial contribution, total obedience. By this point, your mind screams alarm, but your heart hesitates. You've invested so much already. Quitting would feel like admitting you were wrong. Your desire to be consistent overrides your fear. You comply again. Cult leaders know this pain point intimately. They create a ladder of demands that feels almost invisible when you climb. Each rung is a small ask, tiny favors that seem inconsequential. But those tiny favors build momentum. They blur the line between choice and obligation. Before you realize it, you're at the top, staring down at the abyss of demands you once thought impossible. You ask yourself, how did I get here? The answer hides in those early moments when you let someone else steer your actions. A smile, a signature, a small gift. Each one was a concession of your autonomy. Each one whispered, "This is who you are now." And whisper by whisper, your will was shaped by someone else's design. But you can fight back. Awareness is your shield. When someone asks you to do a small favor, pause. Notice the slight tightening in your chest, the flicker of agreement in your mind. Ask yourself why you feel compelled. Remember that every harmless request can be the first step toward total submission. Tiny favors, then big demands. It sounds simple, almost banal, yet it is one of the most powerful mind-benders ever devised. It leverages your own need for consistency against you, twisting small acts of compliance into chains that bind your freedom. So the next time a stranger asks for a quick signature or a fleeting favor, look for the doorway in that request. Guard your autonomy fiercely. You don't have to refuse kindness or community, but you do have the right to choose each step on your own terms. Because once those tiny favors pile up, you may find yourself standing at the threshold of demands you never intended to accept. And by then, the door will be wide open. You sit in a dimly lit room, the air thick with anticipation. No music, no chatter, just the weight of silence pressing against your ears like water against a diver's mask. Your palms grow damp, your heart hammers. You glance at the circle of faces around you, waiting. Your mouth goes dry. Then a single question pierces the stillness. In that moment, you feel compelled to answer. Anything to break the hush. This silence feels like a void, an empty stage begging for a performance. In our minds, quiet is dangerous. It forces us to confront thoughts we keep hidden, desires we dare not admit. Cult leaders know this instinct, our primal dread of the unknown. They use silence like a scalpel, cutting away pretense until only raw confession remains. First comes the setup. A gathering begins with gentle words, small talk, pleasantries, then the leader's voice trails off, and suddenly there is nothing. No music, no background noise, just the echo of breathing. Nervous energy ripples through the group. No one moves, no one speaks. The stillness grows heavy, and then the leader asks a question, a simple question. What do you feel when you think of your past mistakes? Your mind scrambles. You want to stall, to soften the blow, but the silence is too loud. It pushes you forward like a tide dragging you beneath the waves. You begin to speak, revealing vulnerabilities you barely acknowledged yourself. This technique isn't accidental. It's a deliberate trap. When you're confronted with silence, your brain hunts for relief. Any relief. You'll say almost anything to fill the gap. You'll expose secrets. You'll confess fears. You'll volunteer information you would normally guard fiercely. Think of a silent retreat. At first it feels peaceful, a break from the noise of everyday life. But after hours of silence, doubts creep in. You question your thoughts. You question your worth. You become hungry for interaction. Cult leaders twist this craving into a weapon. They offer safe silence that dissolves your boundaries. Then they ask leading questions, and you hand over your privacy, one confession at a time. In one notorious case, recruits of a secretive group endured days of quiet reflection. They were told that silence would unlock spiritual truths. On the final morning, the leader posed a question about loyalty. The room remained utterly still. No coughs, no shuffles, just the unbearably quiet expectancy. Under that pressure, members divulged personal failures, betrayals, doubts, material the leader later used to manipulate and control. The silence also builds a shared experience. A group sitting in collective hush feels united by the same vulnerability. You look at your neighbor and see their tense posture, their trembling hand. You feel less alone, but also more exposed, bound by unseen rules. That unity breeds trust and compliance. After all, if everyone is in the same boat, why resist? When the leader finally breaks the quiet, their words land like thunder. The contrast makes their voice seem more powerful, more authoritative. You lean in, hanging on every syllable. You're primed to believe. The silence has softened your defenses and sharpened your thirst for meaning. You're ready to accept any answer they offer. There's a subtle difference between peaceful silence and manipulative silence. In a healthy conversation, pauses feel calm, reflective. You choose them, but in a cult environment, silence is imposed. You don't feel in control. You feel cornered. The hush belongs to someone else, and you become a puppet dancing on its strings. Even in casual interactions, cult leaders exploit this. A momentary lull in small talk can turn into a probing interrogation. You mention a passing doubt, and they let the silence hang just long enough for you to fill it with confessions. You realize too late that their questions weren't innocent. They were calculated, designed to bait you into revealing what you most wanted to hide. And the most insidious part, once you've spoken, you believe you've surrendered only words, but you've also surrendered power. Your admissions become currency. The leader can remind you of them later. Remember when you said, and you comply out of shame or fear. Silence did the work. Your words locked the cage. Next time you encounter weighted quiet, whether in a strange room, a clandestine meeting, or even a friendly gathering, notice how it makes you feel. Does it calm you, or does it churn your stomach? Does it invite reflection, or does it nag at your insecurities? Cult leaders know the answer. They weaponize silence to make you reveal your deepest self, piece by piece. Silence itself is not truth. But in the clash between stillness and speech, the cracks appear. Your mind rushes to fill the nothingness, laying bare thoughts you thought secure. Nothing forces honesty like the void of sound, and nothing exposes you more thoroughly. So remember, when the silence grows thick, it is not an absence of power. It is the presence of control, quietly calling you to talk. You walk into a sunlit hall where the leader stands on a simple wooden platform, voice smooth as honey. Before he speaks, he raises a hand and casually drops a name, as Mother Teresa once said, and the room leans forward in unison. Hearts skip, minds quiet. The air hums with prestige, borrowed from a saint, renowned for mercy. You feel it too. A flicker of reverence lighting your chest. That flicker is exactly the effect he craves. Name-dropping fires status. Have you ever noticed how a few well-chosen names can transform a bare wooden stage into something sacred? A single reference to a respected figure lifts the speaker on invisible wings. Suddenly he stands on the shoulders of giants, no longer a stranger, but a guide endorsed by history. And you, listening, become a pilgrim, seeking approval from the same heights. It feels almost comforting, as if someone else has already trusted this voice, and you'd be foolish to refuse. That feeling is the smoke and mirrors of social proof in action. Early in the gathering, he mentions Einstein's theory of relativity, weaving physics into a sermon about the soul's expansion. Later, he quotes Gandhi on non-violence to justify his own calls for obedience. Each name glitters, a jewel in his crown. You catch yourself nodding when he mentions Mandela, your mind racing through images of peaceful revolutions. Subconsciously, you equate his movement with those great struggles. You don't pause to question whether his context matches theirs. That split-second fusion is the power of name-dropping. It tethers you to authority without evidence, a borrowed halo illuminating his words. Underneath this illusion lies a simple truth engraved in our psychology. We crave belonging and we revere those we admire. When a leader invokes a name we respect, our brains shortcut into compliance. We assume association equals validation. We trust more, listen longer, and resist less. It is the same mechanism that makes logos on labels feel familiar, or celebrity endorsements turn us into buyers. In a cult setting, name-dropping hijacks these impulses and steers them toward absolute devotion. But name-dropping alone is not innocence. It is a signpost pointing to insecurity. Notice when each reference arrives without substance, when the leader claims scientists agree, but never names the study, when he praises the Dalai Lama's wisdom without context. These are empty shells rolled out to hide the emptiness beneath. True authority stands on transparent ground. It offers clear sources, verifiable labels, honest credentials. Name-dropping that refuses scrutiny is a crimson flag in the tapestry of persuasion. As the meeting deepens, you see the pattern unfold. Every mention of a renowned figure or sacred name is a spark igniting collective awe. The more names he drops, the higher his status burns. Followers begin to echo his phrases, repeating quotes they have never verified. A chorus of approximations swells, forging unity at the price of truth. And you're drawn in, your own words melting into the chorus until you cannot recall what was said and what you believed before. When you step outside later, the sun feels harsh. You hear his final invocation of a Nobel laureate ringing in your ears. You sense the invisible pull to return, as if that broken echo carried power you cannot relinquish. Yet the cool wind on your face reminds you that authenticity cannot be stolen by borrowed prestige. Every time a leader drops a name to shore up his standing, he reveals his own fragility. He needs those shining names more than you need him. Remember this, name-dropping fires status. Status fuels obedience. Obedience cements illusion. The next time you hear a famous name flung like a lifeline, feel the tug on your mind. Ask yourself why this name matters here, in this moment, from this mouth. In that question lies freedom from the glow of borrowed light. In that question lies the power to see past the smoke and mirrors, to demand substance over spectacle, to rise from the borrowed throne and stand on ground of your own making. Imagine a message arriving at your door just after sunset. A crisp envelope, sealed with wax, bearing your name in flowing script. You lift the flap and discover words that shimmer with promise. We request your presence at a gathering known only to a chosen few. You are chosen. You are special. Have you ever felt that rush when you realize you're part of something secret? that pulse of excitement when the world outside fades and you stand on the threshold of an exclusive circle. Cult leaders know this feeling intimately. They craft invitations that feel like keys to a hidden kingdom. And the moment you slip through that door, your loyalty begins its silent forging. Think back to a time you received a private invitation. Perhaps a friend invited you to a clandestine party, or whispered about an opportunity just between us. Did you feel a tingle as though you'd been granted a secret privilege? That tingle is by design. It triggers the scarcity instinct. What's rare, what's hidden, becomes irresistibly valuable. At first, the invitation is a whisper in the dark, a gentle tug on your sleeve. You lean in, intrigued. Then it becomes harder to resist. You replay the words in your mind. You imagine the faces you'll see, the knowledge you'll gain. Your anticipation builds. You feel commitment taking root before you even say yes. Once you RSVP, a subtle transformation begins. You start to adopt the mindset of an insider. You crave updates. You check your phone for messages. You feel connected to a purpose greater than your everyday life. That connection is the seed of loyalty. It grows quietly, nurtured by the belief you're among the chosen. Cult leaders amplify this process. They send multiple waves of communication, private webinars, personalized calls, cryptic hints dropped in group chats. Each touchpoint reminds you of your selection. Each reinforces the idea that you belong to an elite few. Your gratitude for the invitation deepens into allegiance. Why does this invitation wield such power? Because it taps into a primal need, the desire to belong. You're wired to seek tribes. Long ago, belonging meant survival. Today, it means identity. When a leader singles you out, you feel seen. You feel valued, and you'll defend that feeling fiercely. As you invest more time, attention, even money, you begin to justify your choices. You tell yourself this group must be extraordinary. You dismiss doubts as misunderstandings, irrelevant chatter from outsiders. That mental twist is called cognitive dissonance. You reconcile your involvement by elevating the group's importance. Then comes the next layer, shared rituals. The invitation evolves into attendance at midnight meditations, weekend retreats, secret handshakes. Each ritual is a rite of passage, cementing the bond. Your mind ties positive emotions to these experiences: euphoria, belonging, meaning, and you start to crave them like a drug. Meanwhile, the leader watches, guiding your journey. They sprinkle in challenges, a test of loyalty, a task that only insiders undertake. You do it willingly, eager to prove your worth. These tasks become badges of honor. They further bind you to the group and to the person who gave you that first precious invitation. Real-world examples abound. Think of the obscure seminar that promises untold power if you qualify for the inner circle, or the motivational coach who offers a limited number of mentorship slots, making you feel privileged when accepted. Once you cross that threshold, walking away feels like betrayal. What about your own life? Reflect on moments when you felt excluded. You remember the sting, the longing to be included. Now imagine the reverse, the elation of being welcomed. It's intoxicating. Leaders exploit that intoxication, lacing their invitations with emotional hooks, warm language, personal anecdotes, subtle flattery. You feel personally chosen. Complexity grows when you realize that exclusive invitations also foster an us versus them mentality. You start viewing outsiders with suspicion. They don't understand. They're not part of the secret, That alienation makes you cling tighter to your fellow insiders and to the leader who brought you in. Yet this tactic isn't inherently sinister. Private clubs, alumni groups, and elite teams use it too. But cult leaders twist it. They leverage your loyalty for manipulation. They demand more sacrifices, financial, emotional, sometimes even ethical. And because you've been personally invited, you hesitate to say no. You don't want to disappoint the person who believed in you. Awareness is your strongest defense. Next time an invitation arrives, notice your reaction. Do you feel honored or apprehensive? Are you drawn by genuine value or by the allure of exclusivity? Ask yourself, what am I willing to give? And why? You hold the power to accept an invitation on your own terms. You can seek transparency before commitment. You can demand clarity about expectations and values. Loyalty should spring from trust, not from the hypnotic pull of secret handshakes and wax seals. Remember that true belonging emerges gradually, through shared values and authentic connection, not through a single moment of selection. A genuine community doesn't need to hide its doors. It welcomes newcomers openly, allowing them to earn trust without veils or whispers. Exclusive invitations build loyalty because they tap into your deepest desires to belong, to matter, to be chosen. Cult leaders harness this instinct and steer it toward devotion. But you can reclaim that instinct for yourself by scrutinizing the invitation, by questioning the motives behind it, by choosing where you invest your loyalty. When you understand how that first moment of selection binds you, you gain the freedom to decide where you truly belong. And that freedom is the greatest invitation of all. Late at night, the glow of your phone screen illuminates a private message. The words shimmer like a secret invitation. Only 7 spots left for our ceremony at dawn. You feel a knot tighten in your stomach, a pulse of excitement and dread. Something about limited availability makes your heart race. It draws you in, closer, faster, deeper into the promise. That is fake scarcity, working its magic. Why does limited availability make our hearts pound faster? You scroll through testimonials from those who claim they just missed the cut, their regret palpable in every word. They talk about glimpses of truth, enlightenment just out of reach. You imagine what slipping through your fingers would feel like. You imagine the shame. You imagine the regret. That fear of missing out claws at your mind until you taste desperation. Cult leaders understand this raw human fear. They wrap their doctrines in exclusivity. They present every teaching as a scarce resource, reserved for the worthy few. Invitations vanish as quickly as they appear. Doors close after the selected arrive. It creates an aura of privilege, and privilege becomes addictive. Every mention of scarcity tightens the web of control. Why do we assume that what is rare must be better? At the core lies a simple cognitive bias, the scarcity heuristic. Your brain equates rarity with value. You assume that what is rare must be more potent, more desirable. It's a mental shortcut that once helped our ancestors survive by grabbing limited food. Now it hijacks your survival instincts to feed cult indoctrination. Then there's loss aversion, an emotional undercurrent that magnifies the pain of missing an opportunity. You'd rather take a small sure loss than risk a big regret. Cult leaders weaponize this, dangling the threat of exclusion like a sharp blade. The pain of missing out feels greater than any satisfaction of joining. It drives you to act against your better judgment. Picture a remote compound where only the first 50 applicants earn entry. You see empty bunks, the last 5 striped in red, labeled reserved. Those bunks whisper promises of belonging. They echo with laughter and tears from those lucky enough to fill them. Those whispers haunt you. They make you lean forward, ready to sacrifice everything for a chance. In workshops, timers tick down in front of you. 15 minutes, then doors shut forever. You watch the seconds fall like drops of blood. Each passing moment increases your anxiety. You feel the primal urge to seize what remains. You feel your mind narrow until only one thought exists. I must enter. That tunnel vision is no accident. It's carefully engineered. Artificial scarcity stretches beyond physical seats. It invades time and attention. Emails flood you with language of urgency. Last chance, final call, ends tonight. They repeat the message until you can't escape it. Each alert sharpens your focus, draws you back into the cult's orbit. It blurs the line between genuine opportunity and a cleverly timed trap. As you commit, you gain more than knowledge. You gain status. You become part of the chosen. Do you really gain freedom by joining or lose it? That status cements your loyalty. It hides any lingering doubts. If you passed the gate, you must be worthy. That thought prevents you from stepping back. Scarcity doesn't just drive demand, it chains your self-esteem to the cult's narrative. Advanced manipulators layer scarcity with social proof. They show you lists of names, screenshots of approvals, congratulatory comments pouring in. You see faces, success stories, glowing endorsements. It's easy to assume these stories are real. It's easier still to want in. You line up behind dozens of others, but you feel like the first person ever granted a glimpse into the inner circle. In that moment, your freedom narrows to a single line: get in or lose out forever. You no longer weigh pros and cons, you chase the illusion of exclusivity. That is the power of fake scarcity. The illusion part. It mimics real scarcity, but it's built on shifting sand and false numbers, always resetting whenever it suits the leader. You might think, I'm too smart for this. But every mind can be lured by the ticking clock and the echo chamber of select voices. Cult leaders count on your intelligence to justify scarcity. They know that smart people overanalyze until they freeze, and the scarcity rush pushes them past paralysis. You become prey to your own shrewdness. Breaking free demands awareness. When you sense urgency, pause, breathe, ask simple questions. How many spots are truly left? How do I know this deadline is real? What happens after time expires? Question the narrative of limitation before you hand over your trust, your money, your commitment. True opportunities exist without endless countdowns. Real communities grow by welcoming new souls, not by slamming doors in your face. Real education doesn't expire at midnight. It doesn't require panic to unlock. When teachings are genuine, they stand open. No matter when you arrive. Fake scarcity drives demand, but it does so by selling you fear, wrapped in glittering promises. It makes you chase ghosts so leaders can guide you where they please. Each deadline met, each seat filled, each breath hurried locks you tighter into a cage of urgency. You have the power to see through this haze. Recognize the lure of scarcity for what it is, a manipulation, not a gift. Step away from the mindless rush. Choose when to seek knowledge, not because the clock demands it, but because you decide. In that calm choice lies true freedom. You step into a small room and instantly feel the warmth of closeness. Chairs are arranged in a tight circle, faces glowing under soft lights. Someone slips an arm around you, calling you family. You haven't known these people for more than minutes, yet their bodies press near enough to blur the line between stranger and confidant. That rush of comfort isn't coincidence, it's persuasion disguised as affection. In human history, physical closeness meant safety. We huddled around fires, clustered in shelters, shared every burden to survive. That instinct lives on when someone stands near you, when voices lower and shoulders brush. Your brain whispers, "This is home." It releases chemicals that dull suspicion, that make your heart believe it's found a refuge. Cult leaders use that ancient wiring like a master key. They shrink the circle, draw you in with nicknames and pats on the back. In the first week, you're beloved. In the next, you share secrets you wouldn't tell your closest friend. You lean in when they speak, absorb their breath, catch their every glance. It feels intimate. It feels safe. It feels real. Oxytocin floods your bloodstream every time someone touches your arm or leans close enough to whisper. You mistake that chemical for trust. You crave more proximity. Group hugs, late-night confessions, hand-holding rituals. That craving becomes the hook. You'll do almost anything to keep feeling that surge of connection, even when the words they preach start to fray at the edges. You don't notice the pace. It's never all at once. It's in the gentle guidance from arm to shoulder to waist. It's in the retreat to candlelit rooms. It's in silent prayers where you're not just a watcher, but the center of every vow. Before you realize, you've traded your private world for this manufactured closeness. And it's not only physical, they build emotional proximity too. You share your darkest fears, your hidden regrets, and they respond with solemn nods and matching confessions. You feel seen, you feel heard, you feel known. But those reflections aren't genuine. They're carefully calibrated responses, mimicking empathy to breed dependence. There's a moment when you catch yourself craving their approval more than your own reflection. You arrange your life around the next gathering, the next embrace, the next hushed promise of belonging. You forget your old friends, the ones who knew you before the circle tightened. You start to believe that no one else could ever understand you like they do. Yet beneath every whisper of affection lies a question you're too afraid to voice. Who am I without their closeness? The bonds they forge so swiftly feel unbreakable, but they're made of smoke and mirrors. When obedience falters, the same proximity becomes a cage. Hugs turn into hold-downs, whispers into threats. The comfort you once sought morphs into control. False intimacy is the velvet glove over an iron fist. It cloaks manipulation in warmth. It convinces you that proximity is proof of loyalty, that touching equals truth, that closeness means you belong. But real intimacy grows slowly, through shared hardship and unhurried honesty. False intimacy explodes into your life, then collapses around you with bone-crushing force. If you listen to the spaces between those whispered reassurances, you'll hear the truth slipping away. Behind every embrace designed to bind you lies the echo of your own voice, distanced and alone. And in that echo, you remember what genuine intimacy sounds like, a steady heartbeat shared, not stolen. Because proximity can create the illusion of connection, but it cannot forge authenticity. True intimacy is earned over time, in daylight and darkness alike. False intimacy is a lie dressed in warm skin. And when the warmth fades, you'll discover that the only thing it ever bound you to was deception. Picture yourself stepping into a dimly lit room. You're not alone here. Everyone's eyes greet you with a gentle glow. When the leader's voice rises, a soft chorus answers in unison. We are one. In that moment, the simple act of declaring we ignites a spark of belonging. It feels like a lifeline tossed to a soul drifting in isolation. You lean in, you gasp for air. You crave inclusion. You become part of the we. Have you ever noticed how a single pronoun can reshape reality? I stands for the self, for separation. You is an echo of otherness, of judgment. But we is a sanctuary. We is a promise. We is a powerful bridge that spans the chasm between strangers. When someone invites you into we, they're telling you that your wounds, your fears, your past, all of it melts away under the warmth of a collective identity. Imagine a newcomer arriving at an outdoor gathering. The sun dips low, shadows dance among the trees. The leader extends a hand and murmurs, "We have waited for you." Instantly, the newcomer's pulse skips. Those words carry weight. They carry a story. They carry the idea that your arrival was destiny. You're meant to belong. You're part of something greater than yourself. Your loneliness is replaced by unity. And unity tastes like hope. Behind this simple shift lies a neurological secret. Our brains crave predictability, safety, and social bonds. When you hear we, your mirror neurons ignite. Your brain begins to sync with those around you. Heart rates align, breathing slows in harmony. You start to mirror the gestures of the group without realizing it. Declaring we doesn't just reshape language, it rewires your body and mind to become part of a single organism. Consider the story of a remote communal retreat. New members arrive cautious, skeptical. On the first night, everyone stands in a circle, holds hands and chants, "We are free." Those words pulse through the silence, carving nerves into pathways of trust. Doubts dissolve. Questions evaporate. The next morning, when the leader asks you to discard your watch, your hesitation is swallowed by that same we. Your identity now floats in the collective. You relinquish time itself because you believe we transcends the tick of seconds. But this unity is a double-edged sword. Once you cross that threshold, you begin to measure your worth by its standards. We demands conformity. We hushes doubt. We becomes a cage disguised as a sanctuary. You start to believe that to question we is to betray we. The more you declare we, the more your own voice fades into the chorus. You become both participant and prisoner of an idea. Yet the most insidious trick is that you don't notice your capture. Cult leaders masterfully weave subtle shifts. A casual remark here, "We trust each other." A gentle correction there, "Speak for we, not for self." Over time, you slip from individual speech into collective speech without realizing it. Your thoughts reshape themselves to fit the group narrative. You repeat phrases you never truly examined. You adopt beliefs you never questioned. You become convinced that your salvation lies in uttering we. Let's rewind to a notorious incident, a secluded community deep in the jungle. The leader's final speech thundered, "We shall ascend together," that we carried the weight of destiny, of righteous purpose. Followers believed so fervently that they walked into the unknown together. When tragedy struck, when reality shattered their illusions, it was we that bound them to a shared fate. It was we that drove them forward, hand in hand, beyond the point of return. As you step back from these stories, you begin to see the pattern. We is a hypnotic anchor. It draws your attention away from the edges where questions linger. It pulls you toward the center where answers are already written. It locks you into a reality constructed by someone else's design, and once you're locked in, you'll fight to defend we, even when it's hurting you. So how do you guard against this spell? First, listen for the pronouns you use. Do you say I or we when describing your beliefs? Do you attribute your feelings to you or to a collective? Second, pause when you hear we invoked in emotionally charged moments. Ask yourself, whose we is this? Is it my own or someone else's? Finally, reclaim your voice. Speak your doubts aloud. Let I return to your sentences. Let you and me break free from the cage of we. Declaring we enforces unity. It builds bonds, it builds trust, it builds community. But unchecked, it can erase you. It can transform your identity into an echo, your will into a whisper. You must choose when to embrace we and when to hold on to yourself. Because unity without autonomy is not unity at all. It's surrender. And surrender is the last step before the fall. Imagine stepping into a softly lit gathering before you've uttered a single word. A stranger approaches and drops a compliment you didn't expect. Something small, like how your laugh carries a warmth that feels like sunshine on a cloudy day. At first it seems harmless, even joyful. You smile, your heart lifts, and you feel drawn in. But beneath that sweet moment lies a powerful undercurrent. That random praise is the first domino in a chain of obligation. One simple phrase can cede a debt you never consented to owe. Compliments drive obligation. It's a basic law of human reciprocity. When someone gives us something, a gift, a favor, or even kind words, we feel compelled to give something back. It's wired into our brains. We remember kindness and seek to balance the scales. A genuine compliment can feel like a gift wrapped in warmth. But when wielded deliberately, it becomes a manipulation tool. Why does a brief moment of praise feel like a weight pressing on your shoulders? Because your mind starts hunting for ways to repay that unseen debt. Ancient communities survived by trading goats and grains, and your brain still treats compliments like currency. You sense an unspoken ledger, a silent contract waiting for your signature. When that weight pulls at your conscience, you scramble to find a way to balance the scales. Cult leaders understand this instinct better than most. They know that random compliments scatter seeds of obligation deep in your psyche. They'll lavish praise for your appearance, your insights, your resonance with their message, long before they ask for any commitment. A friendly nod evolves into praise for your character. Before you realize it, you feel grateful, flattered, ready to defend someone who complimented you. That's the trap. They build emotional capital with casual flattery, handing you a ledger of kindness they expect you to repay with loyalty. By highlighting your unique qualities, they elevate you above the crowd, only to bind you more tightly to their cause. That calculated admiration replaces your self-doubts with allegiance. As you grow comfortable, the compliments grow more personal. They notice the way your brow furrows when you're curious. They tell you your questions show remarkable insight. They tell you your voice has an extraordinary power. And you believe them because you've already felt the sweetness of their words. Those random compliments build on one another, like invisible bricks forming a wall around your resistance. You can't tear down walls you helped build, brick by brick, convinced you were constructing shelter. It works like invisible glue, binding you to their cause. By the time you realize the glue has set, you're part of the machinery they control. The chemistry behind this is relentless. Praise triggers a rush of dopamine, that feel-good chemical that rewards our brains for seeking social connection. Every compliment feels like a small hit of pleasure. Your neural pathways carve out grooves, anticipating the next dose. You start craving those approving glances and sweet words. Then, when you crave them enough, you'll do almost anything to earn them again. You'll sit through long sessions, repeat phrases in unison, recruit friends who see you glowing under their attention. You'll give your time, your money, your beliefs. Under the hood, adrenaline spikes, blood rushes, your pulse quickens, even if you don't notice. That cocktail of chemicals intensifies the praise, forging memories that feel as real as any promise. Consider the story of a newcomer who wandered into a spiritual retreat. Within hours, they were told how their aura shimmered with pure light. They were praised as chosen, special, destined for greatness. The compliments felt like revelations. They accepted the group's teachings unquestioningly. By the time the leaders asked for donations, trust had morphed into obligation. The seed they planted sprouted into a wilderness of devotion. No one noticed that the initial flattery came unprompted and free, until the fees appeared and the power of praise revealed itself as the currency of control. They invite you to share a personal struggle, then respond with praise for your vulnerability. That intimate compliment solidifies trust faster than any logical argument. Your immunity lies in awareness. Notice how someone treats you before they ask anything. Pay attention to the cadence of praise, how it arrives like confetti in a storm. Baseline your interactions. Watch the moments of calm when no compliment comes, then feel the emotional shift when it does. Ask yourself, why now? What debt have I just signed up for? Whenever praise rises suddenly, especially from someone who stands to gain from your gratitude, pause and question. Journalists and psychologists call this the halo trap. When you're lifted by a string of compliments, you're blinded to warning signs flickering beneath the surface. Random compliments drive obligation because they exploit the unspoken ledger in every human exchange. They tip the scales in someone's favor long before you agree to anything. They cloak manipulation in warmth, creating an emotional bond built on uneven footing. But once you recognize the pattern, the power flips back to you. You can enjoy genuine kindness without falling prey to strategic flattery. You can thank someone and walk away. You can reclaim agency by refusing praise that feels too timed, too precise. You can choose when to deposit gratitude and when to reject strings attached. In the end, the words of warmth belong to you to accept or refuse, free from hidden agendas. You settle into the circle, the room humming with murmurs and expectation. The leader's eyes sweep over you, warm and inviting. Then comes the question, delivered with a soft smile. Why do you still doubt our truth? It seems innocent. A question. You feel its weight settle on your shoulders. Why do you still doubt? The question assumes you've doubted. It tucks the answer into its own frame. Loaded questions are traps disguised as curiosity. They guide your answer before you can speak. They force you into their logic. They leave no room for escape. Have you ever paused when someone asks you, when did you stop caring about your own happiness? You stumble, because the question hides an accusation that you once cared, and then you didn't. You can't answer without accepting the premise. Cult leaders weaponize this silent code. They lace questions with assumptions that lock you in. Don't you agree that your old life was meaningless? You hear again, the word meaningless floats in the air. You feel it like a weight in your chest. These questions guide your answers, steering you toward admission. Admission of guilt, admission of loyalty, admission of doubt. They force you to play on their field, under their rules. Imagine a question that folds itself around your mind like a vine. You try to pry open your answer, but the vine's stem has already wrapped itself around your senses. You can't separate the question from its trap. First comes the simple question, wrapped in flattery. Wouldn't you like to be part of something bigger than yourself? A harmless invitation, but it hides the assumption that you're currently small, alone, missing out. You nod, eager to belong. You fall further into their net. Next follow the double binds. Do you want to be free, or do you want security? You hesitate, because freedom and security seem opposed. You pick one, but by choosing, you reject the other. You reveal your fear of insecurity. You betray your desire for control. Then come the loaded assertions. Why haven't you chosen us when everything else has failed you? You blink at the word failed. Did everything else fail you? Now you must defend your past. You argue that they didn't. You argue that they did. Either way, you engage their narrative. Each question guides your answer deeper into their reality. Each response becomes a confession. You confess your doubts. You confess your loyalty. You confess your past sins. You confess your desire for salvation. Cult leaders speak in riddles of obligation. How could you ignore the suffering of souls who need our light? The suffering souls hang there like ghosts. You feel guilty. Did you ignore them? You scramble for a defense. You pledge to care harder. You no longer speak of your own needs. You speak of their needs. Their words become your own. Because every question they ask shifts your focus outward onto their agenda. They guide you into their answers. You begin to question your own questions. What do you want? What do you fear? Who do you trust? And then you ask yourself, but only within their framework. You never step outside. Loaded questions are the silent architects of compliance. They build walls around your mind. They sculpt your inner monologue to echo their themes. Imagine walking through a maze of mirrors. Each mirror asks you, why do you look away from your reflection? You pause. Your reflection stares back. You wonder if you want to see yourself. You worry what you might find. You edge forward into the maze. That maze is their influence. Each mirror is a loaded question. Each reflection is your answer shaped to their design. Spotting these traps takes awareness. You must listen not just to the words, but to the assumptions between them. You must sense the hidden invitation to confess. When you hear, why do you still doubt? Pause before you answer. Feel the question. Notice the assumption. Then step outside its frame. You might reply, I don't accept your premise, or ask, why do you assume I doubt at all? By naming the trap, you free yourself. You shift the power. You stop playing by their rules. Cult leaders dread that simple refusal. They thrive on guiding your answers. They lose control when you disrupt their script. Every loaded question they ask is a test of obedience, a test of submission, a test of willingness to accept their story. The next time someone asks you, why haven't you joined us? Feel the pull beneath the question. Feel the expectation that you'll explain yourself. Feel the invitation to step onto their stage. Then choose your own stage. Refuse the premise. Create your own question. Because loaded questions guide answers. And once you guide your own answers, you reclaim your mind. You shatter their maze of mirrors. You break through their vines. In the silence that follows, your true questions finally emerge. Who am I? What do I believe? Where do I stand? Those are questions you can answer on your own terms. And in those answers, you find your freedom. You're in a conversation with someone you've just met. Within minutes, they tell you about their childhood trauma, their failed marriage, and their ongoing struggle with addiction. It's a lot. It's uncomfortable. But here's the twist. You feel closer to them. You feel trusted. You feel like you owe them something back. That's not an accident. That's oversharing used as a weapon. And it works far better than you'd think. When someone discloses something intensely personal, your natural response isn't suspicion. It's empathy. Vulnerability triggers reciprocity. You feel compelled to match their openness, to share your own stories, to build an emotional bridge. It's baked into your psychology, this unspoken rule that when someone opens up, you're supposed to open up too. But what if that vulnerability is strategic? What if it's not a cry for help, but a calculated move? Cult leaders, master manipulators, and even certain politicians use this principle with terrifying precision. They disclose intimate, sometimes disturbing details about themselves early on. Not to confess, not to connect, but to disarm. It lowers your guard, makes you believe they're authentic, raw, human, And once you feel seen, you're hooked. This is the paradox of vulnerability. It feels like truth, but it can be the most effective lie. Oversharing doesn't just invite empathy, it creates a sense of exclusivity. When someone tells you something deeply personal, especially early in a relationship, you feel chosen, like you've been given access to a part of them that no one else gets to see. That illusion of intimacy creates loyalty. It makes you more likely to defend them, to believe them, even when things start to feel off. This tactic is used in recruitment too, not just for cults, but for high-pressure sales, multi-level marketing, even extremist political groups. The recruiter doesn't start with facts, they start with feelings. Let me tell you about the worst moment of my life. It's raw, it's real, or at least it seems to be. And before you realize it, you're not analyzing what they're saying, you're feeling it, you're empathizing, you're bonding, you're getting pulled in. It's called the disclosure reciprocity effect. In short, when someone shares something personal, we instinctively want to reciprocate. It's a feedback loop of emotional exposure. And once you've opened up, once you've shared something personal, it becomes much harder to walk away, because now you're invested. Now you're vulnerable too. That's the trap. The moment you share something personal back, you've given them leverage. They now know a piece of your truth, something they can remind you of, something they can use to bind you closer or to manipulate you later. And if they've been oversharing with others as well, you're not special, you're just one of many caught in their web. But it still works. Because we're wired for connection, we want to be trusted, we want to feel safe with others, and that makes us dangerously receptive to strategic vulnerability. Think about the last time someone told you something too much too soon. Did you question their motives? Or did you feel honored, curious, closer? This is why oversharing is so powerful. It doesn't trigger your defenses. It lowers them. You might think real manipulation is cold, calculated, distant. But the best manipulators are warm. They cry. They confess. They bleed in front of you. And that performance, because it often is a performance, pulls you in deeper than any logical argument ever could. They don't want you to think. They want you to feel. And once you're feeling deeply enough, you stop analyzing. You stop questioning. You start believing. That's the moment persuasion becomes possession. When someone isn't just influencing your thoughts, but rewiring your emotions, your loyalty, your identity. So next time someone bares their soul too quickly, ask yourself, are they being honest? Or are they just really good at making you feel seen? Because when oversharing becomes a tactic, it's no longer about connection, it's about control. You're in a dark room, not physically, but psychologically. You don't even realize it, because the walls aren't made of brick or steel. They're made of something far subtler. The absence of choice. Imagine being born into a room with only one door. You're told it's freedom. You're told that stepping through it is your destiny. So you walk. You walk because there's no other path, no other option, no other imaginable way forward. But here's the trick. When there's only one option, is it really a choice? This is how dependency begins. Cults know this better than anyone. And not just the ones you picture with robes and chants. We're talking about cults of ideology, of identity, of consumerism, even your workplace. They all work from the same blueprint: remove alternatives until submission feels like loyalty. Dependency doesn't always come from threats. It comes from design, from limiting your environment until what you're given feels like the only thing that exists. The only thing that matters. The only thing that can save you. Take a moment and think about it. What do you really need to feel safe, to feel secure, to feel seen? Now imagine being slowly taught that only one source can give it to you. Not immediately, not forcefully, but gradually, over time, piece by piece. Your social group becomes smaller. Dissenting voices are called toxic. Contradictory information is forbidden. You're told that outsiders don't understand, that they'll hurt you, that they don't care about you like we do. And soon enough, your world has shrunk to a single narrative, a single leader, a single truth. And walking away from it doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like death. Because now, everything you need is behind that one door. This is psychological architecture. A maze designed not to trap your body, but your perception. And once you're inside that maze, everything reinforces the illusion that staying is your only rational choice. You're rewarded for compliance, isolated for questioning, praised for loyalty, punished with silence for doubt. They don't even have to watch you, because you start watching yourself. Here's the most dangerous part. When you remove alternatives, people don't just feel trapped, they feel chosen. They feel special. They believe the illusion that they're in control because they willingly stay. But willing is meaningless when there are no options. Loyalty means nothing when betrayal is impossible. Think of how this works in cults of personality. The leader is the only interpreter of truth, the only voice of reason, the only one who understands you. If you leave, you're not just walking away from them, you're abandoning meaning itself. Your beliefs, your identity, your sense of purpose, all of it feels like it only exists inside their system. Now take this same blueprint and zoom out. Look at consumer systems, where your entire lifestyle is wrapped around one brand, one company, one platform. You don't just use it, you depend on it to communicate, to be seen, to feel like you exist. The algorithm decides what you want before you even know it. Your habits become theirs, your choices pre-selected. Or look at jobs, where you're told that one employer, one path, one climb up, one corporate ladder is the only way to succeed. You stop imagining life outside of it. You fear losing your paycheck more than losing your mind, so you endure, you adapt. You convince yourself that it's better here, because the unknown feels unbearable. But that's the trick. When there are no alternatives, suffering doesn't feel like coercion, it feels like fate. You stop fighting, not because you're weak, but because you've been taught there's nowhere else to go. This is how dependency becomes devotion. And if someone dares to show you another way, another life, another path, another possibility, you don't thank them, you attack them. You defend your captor. You protect the system that made you small, because without it you don't know who you are. That's how deep this goes. Dependency rewires your sense of self. It collapses your imagination until you mistake captivity for comfort, control for safety, powerlessness for peace. So ask yourself, what parts of your life feel inevitable? What beliefs, what loyalties, what structures have you accepted simply because you've never seen an alternative? Because that's where the trap begins. Not with force, not with chains, but with silence. The silence of missing choices, the absence of exits, the illusion that the door in front of you is the only one that ever existed. And once you believe that, they don't need to trap you. You'll stay all on your own. You walk into a room and it feels like the sun has turned its full attention on you. Smiles that last too long. Compliments that stack so high, they start to lose shape. Everyone seems fascinated by you. Your ideas, your story, your smallest preferences. You feel important, seen, maybe even loved. But something deep in your gut hums with unease. Because this isn't affection. It's strategy. This is love bombing. At first, it feels intoxicating. Who wouldn't want to be flooded with affection, praise, admiration? It triggers your deepest social instincts, the ones evolution carved into your brain to seek connection, tribe, and safety. In isolation, you feel fragile, but in adoration, you feel bulletproof. That's what love bombing exploits. It's not about love, it's about control through affection. Cult leaders understand this perfectly. They use it as an opening move before ideology, before rules, before control. They drench you in validation. You're not just welcome, you're essential. You're not just accepted, you're special. They don't recruit you, they anoint you. Why does it work so well? Because the brain is built to crave consistency. When someone treats you with that level of affection, your mind assumes they must care. And once you believe someone cares, their motives become harder to question. Suspicion feels like betrayal. So instead, you align your beliefs to match their praise. You want to keep that glow, that high, that illusion of unconditional love. That's the trap. Because love bombing isn't unconditional, it's transactional. And the moment you begin to resist, question, hesitate, doubt, it stops. The smiles fade. The warmth turns cold. Suddenly, you're outside the circle. You've disappointed them. And now the only way back in is compliance. The brilliance of love bombing lies in its timing. It overwhelms your defenses before you've had time to build any. You can't resist if you're still absorbing. And by the time your rational mind catches up, your emotional core is already hooked. And it doesn't just happen in cults. It happens in abusive relationships, at toxic workplaces, in manipulative friendships, anywhere someone needs your loyalty before you've had time to think. It's used to bypass your skepticism, fast-track trust, and build dependency. Imagine a starving person being offered a feast. They don't ask who's serving or why. They eat. And in those first few moments, gratitude silences caution. That's what love bombing does. It starves you emotionally, then feeds you more than you can handle. And like any addict, you chase the high once it's gone. You justify, forgive, explain away the sudden coldness, the manipulations, the demands. You tell yourself they're still the person who loved you so hard in the beginning, that it must be your fault, that if you can just be better, they'll return to who they were, but they won't. Because who they were was a mask, an opening act. Love bombing is not affection, it's warfare dressed in kindness. It doesn't just erode your skepticism, it repaints it as betrayal. The more you trust, the harder it becomes to see the trap. You begin to defend your captor, doubt your own instincts, protect the very structure that's breaking you. It's not weakness, it's wiring. Human beings are tribal by nature. We long for belonging so badly that we'll rewrite ourselves just to fit. That's why love bombing is so devastating. It hacks our most sacred need, the need to be loved. But here's the hardest part. Even when you know what it is, even when you name it, you still miss it when it's gone. Because the manipulation was real, yes, but so was the feeling. And that's what makes it dangerous. It leaves behind a hunger, a blueprint, a craving. And that craving makes you vulnerable to the next person who knows how to weaponize affection. That's how love bombing overwhelms resistance. It doesn't argue with your mind, it bypasses it completely. It speaks to your loneliness, it comforts your shame, it drowns your doubt in honey. And before you know it, you're not resisting anymore, you're grateful. You're in a room full of people who believe they're free. They smile, make decisions, go to work, vote, apologize. But somewhere underneath it all, there's a subtle, ever-present weight pressing down on their conscience. That weight is guilt. And the most terrifying part, they don't even realize it's been installed there, deliberately. Guilt isn't just an emotion. It's a tool, a mechanism of control. It rewires your decision-making, hijacks your autonomy, and convinces you that obedience is the path to moral purity. And the more moral you think you are, the more susceptible you become. Think back to childhood. How many times were you told, good people don't make trouble, or think about how disappointed they'll be? Not punished, not reprimanded, just disappointed. That's the trick. Guilt doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't hurt you directly. It makes you hurt yourself. And that's why it works. Guilt tricks you into thinking your obedience is your idea, that your compliance comes from your own values, your own ethics. But underneath, there's pressure, silent, invisible, relentless. Cult leaders know this, not in theory, but in practice. They don't lead with threats. They lead with love, with community, with purpose. Then they install guilt like a parasite. Miss a meeting, you're letting everyone down. Question the doctrine. You're betraying the truth. Leave the group. You're abandoning the only people who ever truly cared about you. It's not about fear, it's about shame. This isn't unique to cults. It's everywhere. Workplaces reward the employees who sacrifice most, then guilt them when they dare to set boundaries. Families speak in the language of obligation. After all we've done for you. Political systems ask for your loyalty, not through logic, but through guilt-laced narratives of patriotism and duty. You don't just break rules, you betray something sacred. And guilt makes that betrayal feel unbearable. But here's the deeper trick. The more empathetic, the more compassionate you are, the more this works on you. Guilt is most effective on those who want to do good. The people who ask themselves, am I doing enough? Those are the ones easiest to control, not because they're weak, but because they care. That care is turned against them. You feel the pressure to say yes when you mean no, to nod along when you have doubts, to smile when you're dying inside. Because guilt tells you that honesty might hurt someone, that standing up for yourself is selfish, that saying no means you're a bad friend, a bad partner, a bad person. And it doesn't stop there. Guilt becomes internalized. After a while, no one has to guilt trip you. You do it to yourself. You become your own warden, your own jailer, monitoring every word, every decision, every impulse. And the cell isn't physical, it's moral, it's emotional. It's built from the belief that your worth is measured by your willingness to sacrifice. So when someone asks you to stay late at work, to donate more, to be silent for the sake of peace, you obey, not because they have power over you, but because guilt does. Because you've been trained to believe that disobedience equals harm, that standing up for yourself makes someone else suffer. And that illusion is powerful, because it's partly true. Yes, your defiance might upset someone. It might inconvenience them. But the question you've never been allowed to ask is, so what? Why is their comfort your responsibility? Why does your conscience have to carry the weight of everyone else's expectations? Because guilt told you it's noble, that it's kind, that it's what good people do. But here's the truth. If your morality is driven by guilt, it's not morality, it's coercion. If your kindness is a response to pressure, it's not compassion, it's submission. Real ethics come from choice, not from fear of emotional punishment. So start paying attention to every time you say yes when you mean, to every apology you offer that isn't rooted in truth but in fear, to every moment where guilt becomes the leash around your freedom. Because once you see it, you can start to cut the strings. You can choose integrity over obedience, truth over appeasement. You can stop letting guilt be the quiet dictator of your life. Guilt is a powerful tool, but only if you believe it belongs to you. Once you realize it was placed there by others, by systems, by manipulators, by ideologies, it loses its grip. You are not a puppet. You are not a servant of their shame. You are allowed to be free, even if it makes someone else uncomfortable. even if it disappoints the voice that's been whispering in your head for years, especially then. You're standing in front of a group. Maybe it's your coworkers, your friends, or even just your followers online. You say something bold, something defining. I'm going to do this. The words come out clear, proud, and firm. And the moment they leave your lips, something strange happens. They begin to own you. You don't realize it at first. But as the days pass, that one sentence you spoke aloud starts to shape your decisions. It guides your behavior, limits your options, and boxes you into a path you didn't fully understand when you chose it. You feel compelled to follow through, not because it's still the best choice, but because you said you would. This is the power of public commitment. And cult leaders, they know how to wield it like a weapon. They don't start with mind control or threats. They start with something much simpler. A question, a request, a statement that feels harmless. Do you believe in love? Do you want to help others? Will you commit to this mission? And when you say yes, especially in front of others, you're hooked. Because when you publicly align with an idea, you begin to rewrite your identity to match it. You no longer just think it, you become it. I am a believer. I am a supporter. I am one of them. And the moment your identity is on the line, doubt becomes betrayal. Hesitation feels like self-destruction. To question the group is to question yourself. It sounds irrational, but it's deeply human. We crave consistency, not just in our actions, but in how others perceive us. Once we've declared ourselves, we'll go to astonishing lengths to remain congruent with that declaration. We'll double down, justify, and rationalize, even when the truth is screaming in our face. This is why cults don't ask for everything up front. They ask for a little, a small step, a tiny commitment. Maybe a meeting, a donation, a promise to return, but that first yes is everything. It sets the trap. Because once you've said yes out loud, you start to believe the lie you're part of something meaningful, something noble, something necessary. And every next commitment becomes easier. You've already said yes. You've already told your family you're involved. You've posted about it. You've defended it. And now walking away means admitting you were wrong. It means embarrassment. It means shame. So you stay. Not because you still believe, but because backing out feels worse than continuing the lie. Even outside of cults, this tactic is everywhere. Companies use it. Political movements use it. Social media thrives on it. They all want the same thing. Your public commitment. Once you've posted that opinion, signed that petition, or joined that group, they know you're more likely to follow through, defend, and comply. Because silence can be forgiven. Private doubt is invisible. But public commitment, that's binding. And the more visible your commitment, the deeper it roots into your identity. You become the person who said that, who believed that, who joined that. Even if part of you starts to see the cracks, you ignore them. Because to acknowledge them would mean tearing down a version of yourself that others now recognize. The scariest part, the system doesn't need to force you. It just needs you to speak, to post, to pledge. And once you do, you'll police yourself more effectively than any authority ever could. This is why cult leaders don't control you with chains. They control you with mirrors. They show you a version of yourself that you committed to in public, and they dare you to break it. Ask yourself how much of what you do is truly chosen, and how much is simply a performance of the promises you've made. Because the moment your identity depends on a promise you can't break, freedom becomes theater, and you become the actor, reciting lines you no longer believe in a role you didn't realize you were auditioning for. You walk into a room and immediately notice something strange. Everyone is dressed the same, not just similar, identical, the same color, the same fabric, the same cut. It's eerie, like stepping into a clone factory. But here's the thing, no one else seems to notice. They're talking, laughing, working, completely unaware of how uniform they've become. Now imagine this room is the world, and that sameness isn't just about clothes, it's a symptom of something deeper, a signal, because identical clothing isn't just fashion, it's conformity dressed as normalcy. Uniforms were never invented for comfort, they were created for control. In the military, in religious orders, in corporate offices, they erase individuality and replace it with obedience. You stop being a person, you become a role, a cog in a larger machine that functions better when no one asks questions. Cult leaders understand this instinctively. They don't just preach, they prescribe outfits, haircuts, symbols, because when everyone looks the same, they start to think the same. Clothing becomes a psychological leash, a quiet command that says, don't stand out, don't question, don't break formation. This isn't just metaphor. Psychological studies show that wearing uniforms or matching outfits increases group cohesion, but at a cost. You sacrifice personal judgment. You suppress dissent. You conform, not because you agree, but because you don't want to be the one who doesn't match. Look at high-control groups, from religious sects to authoritarian regimes. They almost always enforce a strict dress code. Why? Because it breaks down resistance. It sends a signal. Your identity is no longer yours. It belongs to the group. And once you accept it on the outside, it becomes easier to surrender on the inside. But this isn't just about cults, it's about culture. Think about school dress codes, corporate attire, influencer trends. We are conditioned from a young age to believe that fitting in is safety, that blending in is virtue. You're taught to dress for the job you want, not the life you have. To wear what everyone else wears so you don't make anyone uncomfortable. Even rebellion is commodified. Alternative fashion is sold in mass-produced batches, marketed as individualism, while ensuring no one strays too far. You believe you're expressing yourself, but you're just picking from a curated menu of approved uniqueness. And here's the sinister part. Once the outside is standardized, it becomes easier to reshape the inside. You become more suggestible, more compliant, more loyal. You don't just follow the dress code. You follow the code, unquestioningly. That's why cult leaders obsess over appearance. It's not vanity, it's strategy. It's about building an identity that depends on the group. If your reflection shows their reflection, then losing them feels like losing yourself. But conformity isn't always enforced through fear. Often, it's disguised as love. We dress this way because we belong together. We look alike because we care. And when you challenge that, you're accused of pride, arrogance, disloyalty. So you comply. Not because you're convinced, but because you're afraid of being cast out. And still, you tell yourself it's harmless. It's just clothes. It's not like they control your mind. But that's the trick. It is your mind. That moment, you hesitate to wear something different, to be seen as too much, too strange, too bold. That's not fashion. That's conditioning. Because the more you conform outwardly, the less you question inwardly. And in that silence, something dies. The part of you that's wild, questioning, untamed. The part of you that asks why, when everyone else says, because, the part that doesn't match. That won't match. That was never meant to. So ask yourself, when you get dressed tomorrow, are you expressing something, or are you hiding? because clothing can be armor, but it can also be a chain, and sometimes the smallest acts of rebellion start with the clothes you choose not to wear. You're in a dim room, a single candle flickers. Around you, a dozen voices rise and fall in perfect unison, their chant echoing through your bones. You don't know the language. You don't need to. What matters isn't the meaning. It's the rhythm, the pulse, the feeling of something ancient and absolute wrapping itself around your brain like a warm, suffocating blanket. At first, your thoughts rebel. You question the ritual. You ask why. You wonder what it's all for. But the chant doesn't stop. It seeps in, syllable by syllable, wave after wave. And slowly, something changes. The questions soften. Doubt becomes distant. The rhythm overtakes the noise in your head. This isn't magic. This is design. Rhythmic chanting has been used for centuries, not because it connects us to the divine, but because it drowns out the part of us that resists. It overrides the analytical mind, bypasses critical thinking, and locks you into sync with the group. The rhythm doesn't just unite voices, it aligns brain waves, literally. Neuroscience confirms it. Synchronized rhythm promotes trance-like states. In that state, you're no longer fully you become part of something else, something easier to control. Now consider why cult leaders love the chant. Not just the words, but the repetition, the music, the cadence. It's hypnotic. It gives people relief from the chaos in their minds. And when someone feels relief, they associate it with whoever gave it to them, the leader, the ideology, the group. This isn't persuasion, this is imprinting. And the best part, once you're inside that rhythm, dissent becomes painful. Doubt disrupts the flow. Your brain resists what feels out of sync. So what happens? You repress the doubt just to keep the peace inside your own head. Your own mind becomes your enforcer. You think chanting is harmless? Think again. Look at sports stadiums, political rallies, mega churches. The chant comes first. It binds, it simplifies, it removes the need to think. Suddenly it's not "what do I believe?" It's "what are we saying?" The crowd becomes your compass. Individuality dissolves into noise, and that noise tells you exactly what to feel. It tells you to stop asking questions, and you obey. Because questioning breaks the spell. It separates you from the group. It makes you feel alone again. That's the threat. Not violence, not punishment. Isolation. The chant promises belonging. Rhythm promises harmony. The cost, your autonomy. Ever tried to argue with someone in a chanting crowd? Logic doesn't work. Facts don't land. You're not talking to people anymore. You're talking to an idea wrapped in rhythm. A moving wall of certainty. And that certainty is intoxicating. That's why it's dangerous. Because once the chant becomes part of you, you defend it, even when it's wrong. Even when you know, somewhere deep down, that something isn't right. The chant says, don't think. The chant says, feel what we feel. The chant says, be one of us, and so you are. And the part of you that once questioned, that once doubted, that once hesitated, goes silent. Not because it was answered, but because it was drowned. So next time you hear a chant, ask yourself, what part of you is speaking when you join in? And what part of you just went quiet? Picture a child at the edge of a firelit circle, surrounded by robed figures chanting in rhythm. He doesn't understand the words, he doesn't know the meaning, but he joins in. His voice blends with theirs, his hands mimic their gestures. By the end of the night, something has changed. Not in the ritual, but in him. That's the hidden power of ritual. It doesn't just express belief, it creates it. You might think belief comes first, that people act because they believe. But what if it's the other way around? What if action creates belief? What if your brain, desperate for consistency, builds conviction around whatever you repeatedly do, especially when those actions are public, emotional, and shared? Think of how soldiers are broken down in boot camp. The yelling, the marching, the synchronized routines. It's not just about discipline. It's indoctrination through repetition. You don't just learn to obey, you start to feel that obedience is right, that it's who you are. Or think of a church service, standing, sitting, kneeling, in perfect rhythm with the crowd, singing hymns whose lyrics you might not even fully grasp. And yet, over time, the words feel like your own. The prayers start to echo in your thoughts. You start to believe, not because the logic is airtight, but because the ritual bypasses logic altogether. Cult leaders understand this better than anyone. They don't just lecture, they orchestrate. They build belief by engineering participation, requiring eye contact, enforcing mantras, designing routines, so absurd, so specific, that the only way to justify your participation is to start believing in the cause. Because the alternative, that you're dancing in a circle, chanting nonsense for no reason, would feel too humiliating to bear. That's the trick. The more effort you put into something, the more you need to believe it matters. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance. If your actions and beliefs don't align, your brain will change the belief to match the action, especially when that action is costly, especially when it's performed in front of others. You start to think, I gave up my job for this group. I cut off my family. I wear this strange outfit. There must be a reason, and belief is born, not from conviction, but from necessity. Ritual is belief in motion. It seduces your body first, then colonizes your mind. And it doesn't have to look like a cult. Consider the daily rituals you already follow. Swiping through your phone the moment you wake, reciting a pledge at school, toasting at weddings, singing national anthems. These aren't just traditions, they're micro-reinforcements of identity. Repetitions that mold belief into muscle memory. Every culture, every religion, every ideology has its rituals. And the more elaborate, the more emotionally charged they are, the stronger their hold. They don't just reinforce community, they erase doubt. They replace it with certainty, rhythm, and shared emotion. And once you're inside that rhythm, questioning, it feels wrong, like dancing out of sync with the music. Ritual punishes deviation without needing to speak. It teaches through structure, not argument. So ask yourself, which rituals are you part of without realizing it? Which patterns do you repeat daily, not because you believe in them, but because they were there before you ever questioned? What do you believe today, not because you chose it, but because it was baked into the rituals you were born into? Because belief is rarely a conscious decision. It's not a lightning bolt, it's a slow burn, a rhythm, a routine. 1,000 tiny repetitions that become too familiar to question. And if you're not careful, those rituals will write your beliefs for you, line by line, chant by chant, until your faith isn't something you carry, it's something that carries you. Whether you understand it or not, whether you want it or not, whether it serves you or controls you. You're at a party. Someone tells a joke that crosses a line. Maybe it's sexist, maybe it's racist, maybe it's just cruel. Everyone laughs. You don't. You feel that knot in your stomach, that pause before deciding whether to speak up or stay silent. You glance around, eyes dart. Faces expect conformity. And then it hits you. The laugh isn't just about humor. It's a test of loyalty, of obedience, of shame. Shame isn't some stray emotion. It's a weapon, a leash wrapped around your throat from the moment you first learned what it meant to disappoint. As children, shame taught us boundaries. Don't interrupt. Don't be selfish. Don't question authority. And when we did, we were punished, not always with force, but with disapproval, with silence, with the cold withdrawal of love. That's how shame works. It doesn't just hurt, it isolates. It makes you invisible until you return to the fold. Now amplify that. Take that childhood lesson and stretch it across a society. What do you get? A culture where shame polices every thought, every word, every deviation. The moment you stray too far from what's accepted, from what's normal, you feel it, that tightening, that anxiety, that invisible spotlight that makes you want to shrink yourself, apologize, conform. But here's the terrifying part. Shame doesn't need a dictator. It doesn't need a prison. It builds its own walls inside your mind. And once it's in there, it enforces conformity with surgical precision. You edit your opinions. You water down your feelings. You become a censored version of yourself, not because someone is forcing you, but because shame already did the job. That's why cults don't start with guns or threats. They start with shame. They isolate you from your former self, then flood you with rules, rituals, expectations. And when you slip up, and you will, they don't punish you violently. They make you ashamed, ashamed for doubting, ashamed for questioning, ashamed for wanting out. And that shame is more powerful than fear, because fear makes you run. But shame makes you stay and fix yourself. It's not just cults either. Look closer. Workplaces use shame to keep you late at the office. Families use shame to keep you trapped in outdated roles. Social movements use shame to silence dissent. Shame disguises itself as loyalty, as etiquette, as virtue. And the worst part, you believe it. You think the shame is yours, that you're broken, that your discomfort means you're wrong. But shame isn't telling you the truth. Shame is telling you to disappear. Why is it so effective? Because being cast out, socially, emotionally, spiritually, triggers something primal. We are wired to belong, to be part of a group, and shame weaponizes that need. It whispers that being different means being alone, that stepping out of line means exile. And so you don't just comply, you internalize the rules. You shame yourself before anyone else has to. And this is how systems of control endure. Not with chains, but with expectations. Not with prisons, but with reputations. Not with violence, but with shame. Because when shame takes hold, you police yourself. You discipline your thoughts, your tone, your appearance. You become the guard at your own prison, patrolling your identity for any sign of rebellion. And when you catch it, an opinion that strays, a question too dangerous, you bury it deep and call it growth. But here's the question. What if your shame isn't a sign of guilt, but of growth? What if feeling out of place means you're on the edge of something real? What if shame is less a signal to retreat and more a call to confront? Because the truth is, most of what you've been shamed into believing about your body, your worth, your identity, your truth, was never about you. It was about keeping you small, silent, contained. And once you see that, the spell breaks. Shame stops being a leash and starts being a clue, pointing to the very parts of yourself that have been waiting to be reclaimed. So when you feel that heat rise in your cheeks, that wave of discomfort, ask yourself, whose approval am I afraid of losing? And more importantly, why do they have that power? You are not a mirror, existing only to reflect someone else's comfort. You are not a puppet wired to nod when everyone else claps. You were not born to conform. You were born to confront, to question, to shatter. Shame enforces conformity, but only if you let it, only if you believe the lie that being different makes you wrong. But maybe, just maybe, being different makes you free. You walk into a room. Everything looks familiar, but nothing makes sense. The walls are lined with smiling faces, the kind that feel too perfect. Soft music plays. There's food, comfort, laughter. Everyone seems calm, almost eerily calm, but something's off. The air tastes too sweet. The smiles linger too long. You ask a question, and no one answers. You ask again, and they just smile wider. This is how it begins. Not with threats, not with fear, but with confusion. Cults, contrary to popular belief, don't recruit through terror. They recruit through contradiction. They overwhelm your instincts. They flood your senses with inconsistencies. One moment you're praised, the next you're criticized. One minute you're loved, the next you're isolated. They speak in riddles. They praise you for your potential while pointing out your failures. You're constantly trying to understand, constantly trying to decode the rules. But the rules change over and over again. Confusion isn't a byproduct, it's the point, because the human brain can tolerate uncertainty, but only for so long. Eventually, you crave order. You crave clarity. You want someone, anyone, to give you answers, to make the chaos stop. And that's when they step in. The leader, the voice of certainty in the fog. They explain the pain. They provide the narrative. They offer the truth, but only their truth, and it feels like relief. The trick is timeless. Disorient, then offer direction. Break down, then rebuild. Cults don't offer clarity until they've first shattered your confidence in your own perception, until they've made you doubt your own mind. You begin to ask them what's real, what's moral, what matters, and slowly you stop trusting yourself. This is how they turn intelligent, grounded people into devoted followers. They don't need you to be stupid. They just need you to be unsure. In that uncertainty, your defenses lower, your identity softens. And that's when persuasion becomes transformation. Think of the contradiction. You're told you're special, but only if you conform. You're empowered, but only through obedience. You're free, but only if you follow. This isn't a mistake, it's a pressure cooker. Every contradiction chips away at your critical thinking. And when you finally break, they offer simplicity. Simple truths, simple roles, simple enemies. You're no longer confused, you're converted. But here's the real horror. This technique isn't confined to cults. You see it in politics, in marketing, in relationships. Confuse people, then give them clarity. Disorient them, then provide comfort. Flood them with contradictions until they crave certainty. Then sell them whatever you want. It works because the brain is desperate for coherence, because being lost is unbearable, and clarity, any clarity, feels like rescue. So ask yourself, when was the last time you felt overwhelmed by noise, by contradiction, by chaos? And who offered you clarity? Who gave you the narrative? Did they earn your trust, or did they exploit your confusion? Clarity is addictive. But if it comes too easily, too cleanly, it might not be clarity at all. It might just be control. The most dangerous truths are the ones that feel like relief, because that's when you stop questioning. That's when persuasion turns into possession. And that's when you stop being confused, not because you found the truth, but because someone else defined it for you. You're handed a task. One that sounds simple on the surface, but carries consequences no one talks about. You're asked to prove your loyalty, not just to say you're committed, but to act like it, to demonstrate it in a way that leaves no doubt. And in the world of manipulation, cults, and coercive systems, this isn't just a test, it's a trap. Because loyalty tests aren't about trust, they're about control. It starts small, a harmless request. Skip a meal, cut off contact with someone critical of the group. Say something you don't fully believe. At first, it feels like a test of unity, like joining a team. You comply, thinking it's temporary, thinking it's a sign of growth, of commitment. But here's the trick. Every test you pass changes you. Each time you comply, you give up a piece of autonomy, and with each piece, it becomes harder to resist the next demand. The tests escalate. What begins as silence becomes active defense. What begins as subtle compliance becomes loud devotion. You're asked to prove your loyalty, not just once, but constantly, repeatedly, until your identity is so entangled with the group that questioning it feels like betrayal, and you start to believe that failing the test means failing as a person. This is how entrapment works. It's never obvious. It's psychological erosion, a slow process of testing your boundaries, then punishing you for having any at all. The leader, the group, the ideology, they all claim the same thing. We're just making sure you're with us. But in reality, they're teaching you one lesson over and over. Loyalty means obedience. Think of the person who's asked to cut ties with their family. At first, it's just one person, a cousin, a critical parent. But it doesn't stop there. One disconnection becomes 2, then 5. Then suddenly, the only people left in their life are inside the group. Now, loyalty isn't just expected, it's their only lifeline. And once you have nothing else, loyalty becomes survival. But this kind of loyalty isn't love. It's not trust, it's leverage. Because true loyalty is freely given. It's born from respect, not fear. But cults and coercive systems can't afford that kind of freedom. They need proof, constant proof. Because if they stopped testing you, you might start thinking for yourself. And nothing threatens a manipulative leader more than an independent mind. So they frame every test as righteous. They tell you it's for your own good. They wrap control in the language of virtue. We're making you stronger. We're weeding out the weak. This shows who's truly committed, and you want to be that, committed. Loyal, strong. You don't want to be the one who hesitates, who resists, who questions, but that fear, that need to pass the test, is exactly what keeps you trapped. Because the more you comply, the more you're implicated. You've said the words, defended the lies, repeated the doctrine. You've done things you swore you'd never do, things that made your stomach twist, and now walking away means facing those choices, admitting you were wrong, owning the damage, so you stay. You stay because leaving feels like confessing to something shameful. You stay because the only way to forgive yourself is to convince yourself it was all worth it. And that's the final trap of loyalty tests. They don't just bind you to the group. They bind you to a version of yourself that only exists within it. They make you afraid, not of the leader, but of your own disillusionment. They make you terrified of the question, if I was wrong about this, what else have I been wrong about? Loyalty tests are weapons, not of faith, but of fear. They don't prove devotion, they prove submission. They entrap not by chains, but by choices. Choices you made, under pressure, one at a time, until the only version of you left is the one they created. And once that happens, loyalty isn't a bond. It's a prison. You walk into the room late. Not suspiciously late, just late enough to avoid the group prayer, the shared affirmations, the all eyes on you gaze. You're tired, a little skeptical, but mostly curious. You take a seat, smiles all around. They're warm, welcoming, overly so. But you tell yourself not to be rude. The leader speaks, and it's captivating, not because of what he says, but how he says it. Slow, measured, full of gentle confidence. He tells you you're special, that you've always been searching for something more, that your pain has a purpose, that you're safe now. You feel seen, even if it's just vague enough to apply to anyone. But then it happens. You ask a question. It's innocent, curious, slightly skeptical, and instantly the energy shifts. The warmth drains. Smiles falter. Eyes harden. You're not scolded. You're not punished outright. But the silence that follows is heavy, uncomfortable, and unmistakably intentional. This is your first lesson. In this world, questioning is not curiosity. It's betrayal. The cult doesn't say it out loud. Not yet. But you're being taught, slowly, painfully, that asking the wrong question will cost you the warmth you were just starting to trust. The punishment isn't physical. It's psychological. It's exile in plain sight. A withdrawal of connection, of validation. And when you depend on the group for belonging, for meaning, that silence is deafening. So you learn. Quickly, you stop asking. This is the quiet genius of psychological control. The threat is never shouted. It's whispered. It creeps in through glances, through absence, through the subtle withholding of affection. You don't need to be yelled at to feel fear. You just need to feel alone. Questioning becomes dangerous, not because it's wrong, but because it unravels the illusion of certainty, of unity, of safety. And cults are built entirely on those illusions. Without them, the whole structure wobbles. That's why doubt must be erased, not argued with, not disproven, but punished. And the punishment is precise. If you persist, you're labeled, not as rebellious, but as spiritually unwell, confused, in need of correction. They say they love you, but you're broken. You're slipping. You're on a dark path. Suddenly, your entire identity within the group is poisoned, and the only cure is repentance, conformity, obedience. That's the trap. You're not just punished for questioning. You're rewarded for pretending you never doubted in the first place. You smile when you're supposed to. You nod along, you parrot the right phrases, and the warmth returns. The silence lifts. You're one of them again, but you're not. Not really, because the doubt lingers, silenced, but alive. And now you're doubting yourself. You're questioning your own questions. Were they dangerous? Were they evil? Is there something wrong with you for needing to know more? This is the second punishment. Not from them, but from within. You begin to self-police, to second-guess your thoughts, to censor your curiosity before it ever reaches your mouth. They don't need to monitor you anymore. You've learned to do it yourself. And that's the point. Cults don't control with chains. They control with fear disguised as love. They weaponize your need to belong, your fear of being cast out. And once they've trained you to fear the consequences of doubt, they've won. Because now, even outside the cult, even years later, you'll feel that same flicker of anxiety whenever you ask too many questions. You'll hear that same silence, feel that same chill, and wonder, what if they're right? What if I'm the problem? And that is the deepest punishment of all. The one that outlives the cult. The one that turns your own mind into the cage. Not because you were wrong to question, but because you were taught so expertly that it was safer not to. He kneels before the group, trembling. His voice cracks with devotion. I give this up for all of you, he says, placing his treasured possession, a family heirloom, into the fire. The crowd cheers. They applaud not just the act, but the person. He becomes more than himself. He becomes a symbol, and that's the trick. When sacrifice is met with praise, it stops being pain and becomes purpose. Cults understand this deeply. They don't just tolerate suffering, they glorify it, they wrap it in ceremony. insignificance. The more you give up, the more you're told you belong, and not just belong, are revered. The greater the sacrifice, the greater the status. The more you're willing to lose, the more you're told you matter. This isn't accidental, it's engineered. Because if suffering is painful, people avoid it. But if suffering is praised, people seek it. And if you can convince someone that their suffering is holy, they'll not only endure it, they'll defend it. They'll wear it like armor. They'll thank you for the privilege of giving everything away. The transformation is subtle at first. You're asked to stay late, skip a meal, give a little more. And when you do, you're applauded. Others nod in admiration. Leaders call you selfless. You feel noticed, valued. So next time, you give even more. It starts to feel good, like a moral currency. Now imagine this feedback loop compounding. You begin to equate sacrifice with identity. Who are you, if not the one who always gives? What remains of you once you stop? Soon you start to measure your worth by what you've abandoned. Money, time, comfort, even relationships. Each becomes a bargaining chip in the invisible economy of loyalty. And the more you surrender, the more the system wraps you tighter in praise. It's a golden leash, heavy with meaning, warm with approval. And the tragedy, you begin to believe you chose this. This is how control becomes internal. External pressure is replaced with internal pride. There's no need for threats when guilt does the job. No need for chains when your own desire to be good holds you in place. So when the cult says give more, your answer isn't no, it's how much. You offer up your weekends, your privacy, your voice. You stop asking questions, because asking is selfish. Doubt is weakness. Resistance is betrayal. And every time you hesitate, every time you ache to reclaim a piece of yourself, someone reminds you of how noble you've been, how far you've come, how beautiful your sacrifice is. It sounds like love, but it's manipulation dressed as worship, because praise isn't always kindness. Sometimes praise is the prettiest form of control, and the moment you internalize it, that you are only good when you're giving something up, you become complicit in your own erasure. That's the darkest part. The line between devotion and self-destruction blurs, until you're applauding your own disappearance. So ask yourself, when they praise your sacrifice, who really benefits? What system is your suffering feeding? And who would you be without it? Because praise is powerful, but not every pedestal is safe, and not every sacrifice is yours to make. It starts in silence, not with speeches or doctrines, but with something far more intimate: secrets. Not just any secrets, but ones that feel earned, privileged, sacred. Secrets that make you feel chosen, special, trusted. That's the first move. You're invited into a small circle. The world outside seems colder now, more distant. You're given access to stories no one else is supposed to know. Hidden histories, forbidden truths, revelations cloaked in whispers, and as you listen, you're not just absorbing information, you're becoming bonded, because the moment someone tells you a secret, you're no longer just a bystander, you're a keeper, you're responsible. And that responsibility binds you tighter than any chain. This is one of the oldest, most effective tools of manipulation. Cult leaders don't recruit by shouting from rooftops. They seduce through secrets. They build exclusivity. They feed your desire to matter, to belong to something rare and profound. And once you're inside, it's no longer about facts, it's about identity. You don't just know the secret, you are the secret. And what's more powerful than that? Every secret shared becomes a thread, slowly weaving you into a tapestry of loyalty. You're not being asked to believe, you're being trusted, and when you're trusted, When someone lowers their voice and says, "I haven't told anyone else this," it triggers something primal in you. You lean in, you feel honored, you don't question the truth, you defend it. That's how the shift begins. Suddenly, doubt feels like betrayal. Skepticism isn't just logical, it's disloyal. And that is the trap. Because secrecy isn't just about keeping information hidden from others, it's about controlling how you see yourself. You start to feel distinct from the outside world. They don't understand. They haven't heard what I've heard. You become part of a different reality, where the rules have changed, and everyone on the outside is blind, brainwashed, or evil. And here's the dark genius behind it all. Once you're a part of the inner circle, you'll do anything to protect it. You'll dismiss contradictions. You'll silence your own doubts. You'll even lie for the greater good. Because the secrets you hold aren't just facts, they're now part of your moral code. They justify actions you once thought unthinkable. They warp your compass. And every time you defend them, you double down. Cult leaders understand this perfectly. They don't create loyalty through force. They do it through intimacy, through confession, through the illusion of shared vulnerability. But make no mistake, it's not mutual. You tell them everything. They tell you what keeps you close. The more secrets you hold, the deeper you're in. And with each one, you feel more responsible for the group's safety, its integrity, its mission. You begin to think, if I left, everything might fall apart. That's not just persuasion, that's captivity, and it's psychological brilliance. Because now, you're not just following someone, you're upholding something sacred, and walking away. That doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like betrayal. It feels like the collapse of everything that made your life meaningful. This is why secrets bond members so effectively. Not because the secrets themselves are profound, but because they change who you believe you are. And once that happens, escaping isn't about changing your mind. It's about dismantling your identity. That's why people stay. Not because they're weak, but because they're tethered by trust, by fear, by the unbearable weight of what they know and what it means to forget. And in that silence, that secrecy, the leader doesn't just gain followers, they gain guardians, defenders, believers who would rather rewrite reality than break the bond. You're in a crowded room, surrounded by strangers, and someone asks you to make a life-altering choice. You have 30 seconds. No context, no time to think, just a decision and consequences. Tick, tick. Your brain shifts into survival mode. Not logic, not reflection, but speed. Urgency short-circuits deliberation. It whispers, act now or lose everything. And so you do. Not because it's the best decision, but because it's the only one you had time to make. This is how cults work. They don't just feed you beliefs, they push you to accept them under pressure. Time pressure, social pressure, emotional pressure. They flood your senses, drown you in urgency, and corner you into compliance before you even realize you're making a decision. Think about it. The most dangerous choices in your life rarely felt dangerous at the time. They felt necessary, immediate. You had to say yes or no before you were ready, and afterward, the consequences locked you in place. One step leads to another, and soon you're not just walking a path, you're trapped on it. Cults master this process. They don't ask you to believe everything at once. They start small, a conversation, a meeting, a favor, and each choice you make feels like your own. But behind the scenes, they're controlling one variable you rarely notice: time. The less time you have to think, the more likely you are to say yes, to agree, to follow. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. Time pressure collapses. Complexity. It turns moral dilemmas into simple binaries, in or out, good or bad, loyal or traitor. This technique is used in sales, politics, even relationships. It's called the foot in the door technique, but with a twist. Add urgency, and that foot becomes a wedge. You don't just let someone in, you surrender the whole room. You don't have time to evaluate, to resist, to say no with confidence. Imagine you're isolated, emotionally raw, and someone offers you a solution, a new way of life, a clear purpose, a family. But the offer expires tonight, right now. Decide. That urgency isn't accidental, it's strategic. The faster you decide, the more committed you feel. And once you're in, you defend that decision to protect your sense of self. Because once you make a fast decision under pressure, your mind works overtime to justify it. You don't want to believe you were manipulated, so you rationalize, you internalize. You make the choice feel like conviction, not coercion. And that's how the trap tightens. Cults don't need to use violence to control you. They just need to keep you moving. No time to stop. No time to reflect. One seminar after another. One ritual. One task. One rule. One confession. You're always reacting. Never reflecting. Even outside of cults, this technique is everywhere. Urgent emails. Flash sales. Breaking news. Instant responses demanded. Our culture is addicted to immediacy. And in that rush, truth becomes optional. Reflection becomes a luxury. Speed becomes obedience. Ask yourself, when was the last time you made a decision that truly felt like yours? One you sat with, examined, tested against your values, and still chose freely? Or are you always deciding in motion? Clicking agree, nodding along, going with the flow because stopping feels dangerous. Time pressure creates momentum, and momentum becomes belief. That's the chilling part. You're not persuaded through logic. You're coerced through tempo, through engineered urgency, through the illusion of choice in a shrinking window of time. And once you've made the first decision, the others follow more easily, because now you're invested. Now you have something to lose. So you double down, you defend, you dig deeper. But the truth, you were never given the space to choose freely. Just the illusion of choice, wrapped in the ticking clock of manipulation. And that's what cults understand better than anyone. The greatest control isn't taken. It's rushed. It's hurried. It's disguised as urgency. And the faster you move, the less you see the trap, until it's already closed around you. So the next time someone demands an immediate answer, take a breath. Because the moment you feel rushed is the moment you're most vulnerable, not to the decision, but to the story you'll tell yourself afterward. Not every trap looks like a cage. Some sound like a countdown. You're walking down a quiet street, late at night, when suddenly a stranger shouts a warning. There's danger ahead, they say, something lurking just beyond the corner. You can't see it, you haven't heard it, but your heart begins to race. Why? Because fear doesn't wait for evidence. It only needs a spark. And in that moment, the truth doesn't matter. The warning is enough. This is the first rule of manipulation. Exaggerate outside threats. Make the world seem hostile, unstable, dangerous. Make people afraid, because fear doesn't just paralyze, it persuades, it shapes beliefs, warps perceptions, and creates dependency. And no one understands this better than cult leaders. When you're afraid, you don't ask many questions. You don't analyze the facts or challenge the source. You cling, you seek safety. You want certainty in a world that suddenly feels unpredictable. And that's when they step in, the ones who claim to have the answers, the protection, the truth. Cult leaders don't wait for real threats to emerge. They invent them. They construct invisible enemies, shadowy conspiracies, looming disasters. The government is watching. The outsiders are corrupt. The end is near. These stories don't have to be true. They just have to feel true. Fear is not rational, it's visceral, and that's what makes it so effective. Notice the language they use. Words like attack, invasion, decay, and collapse. Every message is framed as urgent. Every disagreement is dangerous. Every outsider is an enemy. The world becomes black and white. Us versus them. Safe versus unsafe. Right versus evil. There's no space for nuance. That's intentional. Nuance is the enemy of control, and the more afraid you are, the more grateful you become. Grateful to the leader for warning you, for protecting you, for making sense of the chaos, even when they're the ones who created it. Exaggerating outside threats serves another purpose. It justifies control. We need to restrict freedoms to protect you. We need to monitor dissent to keep you safe. Every violation of autonomy is framed as protection, and you accept it because fear makes freedom feel dangerous. You start to believe that safety is more important than independence, that obedience is safer than skepticism, that questioning the leader means siding with the enemy, and slowly, without even realizing it, your fear makes you complicit. This tactic doesn't just appear in fringe cults. It exists in politics, media, even relationships. Anywhere someone seeks power, you'll find fear being weaponized. Think about headlines designed to alarm, policies passed in the name of protection, or partners who isolate you by claiming they're just looking out for you. The pattern is always the same. Amplify the danger, silence dissent, and demand loyalty. And here's the most terrifying part. Once fear becomes your lens, it reshapes everything. You start seeing threats where there are none. You distrust those who think differently. You reject new information that contradicts your fear, because safety now lies in certainty, not truth. You become easy to lead, easy to control. But here's what they don't tell you. The danger outside is never as great as the danger inside. The one that grows when you give up your ability to think, question, and choose. The real threat isn't the enemy at the gates. It's the voice that tells you to stop thinking for yourself. So the next time someone warns you of danger, pause, ask yourself, is this threat real, or is it being sold to you? Who benefits from your fear? Who gains from your obedience? Because once you start asking those questions, the spell begins to break. Fear no longer dictates your beliefs, and suddenly the world becomes yours again. Not theirs, not the cults, not the manipulators, yours. You wake up, the news is already curated. The trending topics, the viral posts, the outrages and celebrations, they're all waiting for you. But you didn't choose them. They were chosen for you. Your morning feed isn't random. It's a script, a carefully constructed pipeline of stimuli designed to shape how you think, feel, and react before you've even had coffee. Control doesn't always look like force. Sometimes it looks like information, or rather, the control of it. Cults understand this perfectly. They don't just tell you what to believe. They control what you're allowed to know. They create informational boundaries, shaping your world so thoroughly that anything outside it feels dangerous, heretical, or false. Over time, they don't need to convince you of anything. They just need to make sure you never see the alternatives. It starts subtly, a warning about outside influences, a restriction on what you can read or watch, a gentle nudge to trust only approved sources. But with each restriction, your mental world gets smaller, and as it shrinks, your certainty grows. That's the paradox. Less information often creates more conviction. You're not drowning in conflicting views. You're marinating in one, and one view, repeated enough, starts to feel like truth. This isn't just a cult strategy, It's a system-wide mechanism. Governments, media conglomerates, social platforms, they all understand the power of curating your reality. Not by lying outright, but by deciding what you're exposed to, what you see, what you don't. They don't need to burn books. They just need to flood your feed with distractions until the important stuff sinks without a trace. It's called information asymmetry. The idea that those who control the flow of information control the narrative, and those who control the narrative control you. Consider the concept of confirmation bias. Your brain loves agreement. It craves reinforcement. If something aligns with what you already believe, it feels true, even if it isn't. So when your information feed is tailored to echo your beliefs, your certainty grows stronger, and your openness to new ideas collapses. The more you're surrounded by agreement, the more foreign disagreement feels. You're not thinking freely, you're thinking comfortably. And comfort, as we've seen, is the best form of control. That's why cults isolate. That's why they encourage members to cut off contact with non-believers. It isn't just about loyalty. It's about information hygiene. If you never hear a dissenting voice, you never question the dominant one. It's not brainwashing. It's brain starvation, a controlled diet of ideas. The modern world does the same thing, but it's more sophisticated. Instead of one doctrine, it gives you a buffet of curated distractions. Endless content, infinite scrolling, hyper-personalized media, all designed to give the illusion of choice while quietly shaping your worldview. It's not about censoring facts, it's about drowning them in noise. You think you're informed, but really you're overwhelmed, and in that overwhelm you become passive, confused, dependent. That's when control becomes easiest, because information isn't just power. It's direction. It tells you what to care about, what to fear, what to ignore. And when someone else decides that for you, you don't just lose your agency, you lose your sense of reality. Ask yourself, when was the last time you changed your mind about something important? Not just modified your opinion, but truly shifted your perspective. That moment requires exposure to something new, something uncomfortable. But if your information environment shields you from discomfort, how do you ever grow? You don't. You calcify, and calcified minds are easy to manage. Cults know this. They don't just preach, they quarantine, they protect you from competing realities until their version is the only one left. And that's when it feels safest, not because it's true, but because it's all you've ever known. Control the information flow, and you control the emotional landscape. Fear, hope, anger, loyalty, all can be dialed up or down depending on what you're shown. It's not about facts, it's about framing. A tragedy can be weaponized, a lie can be elevated, a truth can be buried. Reality becomes a tool, not a destination. And if you dare to question it, if you peek outside the frame, you're labeled paranoid, misinformed, or delusional. Not because you're wrong, but because you've broken the terms of your informational captivity. So here's the real question. Do you consume information, or does it consume you? Because the most dangerous control is the one you never notice. The kind that feels like your own thoughts, your own conclusions, your own beliefs. But if you didn't choose what you see, how sure are you that your thoughts are really yours? You're sitting alone in your room when a single note begins to play, soft, slow, almost innocent. You don't know why, but your eyes sting. A memory surfaces, one you hadn't thought about in years. And just like that, you're no longer alone. You're surrounded by shadows of people you've lost, places you've left behind, feelings you thought had died. Nothing but sound, and suddenly you're unraveling. Music does that. It bypasses logic, skips language, and speaks directly to the rawest part of you. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't care about your defenses. It just reaches in and touches something primal. The way scent can transport you, the way a glance can cut you, music penetrates. But unlike scent or sight, it lingers, it builds, it repeats, it manipulates. That's why cult leaders love it. Because music doesn't just express emotion, it creates it, forces it, controls it. Imagine sitting in a room, surrounded by others, as a rhythmic chant swells in the background. The words are simple. The beat is steady. Your heart sinks to it. Your breath aligns. You feel something rise inside you, pride, belonging, awe. But is it real, or is it manufactured? The answer doesn't matter. You feel it, and so you believe it. That's the trick. Emotion, once triggered, doesn't wait for fact-checking. It rushes forward, blinds you. And music is the most efficient trigger humans have ever discovered. It can make you weep for strangers, kneel to an idea, or surrender to a doctrine. Not because you understand it, but because you feel it. Cults harness this with surgical precision. They don't just sing songs, they compose experiences. Repetition is key. The same melody again and again, until it becomes part of you. Until you can't separate the belief from the sound. Until dissent feels dissonant. Think about national anthems, church hymns, protest chants. Every movement, every power structure, every ideology that wants to burrow into your psyche uses music, not as art, as a weapon. There's a reason why music therapy works, why soldiers use it before battle, why heartbreak has a soundtrack. The brain doesn't just listen, it responds. Music activates the limbic system, the emotional core. It can trigger joy or grief, euphoria or dread. The same song that calms one person can traumatize another, depending on what it's anchored to in memory. Cult leaders exploit that anchoring. They pair music with love bombing, with moments of ecstatic release, with shared emotional peaks. That song you keep humming. It's not just catchy, it's a tether, a psychological anchor to a moment when you felt seen, safe, chosen, even if that moment was engineered. And here's where it gets even darker. Once music becomes a tool of emotional conditioning, it's not just about what you feel, it's about what you stop questioning. Critical thought and emotional overwhelm don't coexist well. If you're sobbing, if you're exulting, you're not analyzing, you're absorbing. And in that moment of openness, the message slips in. The words wrapped in melody become sacred, immune to scrutiny. You don't debate a hymn, you don't interrogate a chant. You repeat it, like a mantra, like a prayer, until it becomes truth. And long after you leave the room, long after you leave the group, the music stays. You hear it in the back of your mind, whispering, nostalgic, familiar, dangerous. Because here's the most chilling part. You never needed to believe in the doctrine. You just needed to feel something strong enough, often enough, for your brain to rewrite the story. Emotional memory is sticky, and music is glue. So the next time you feel a song move you to tears, or make you want to follow, surrender, obey, pause. Ask yourself who's playing the music. Ask yourself why. Because emotion makes you pliable, and nothing manufactures emotion like music. You walk into a room, 3 doors, all look the same, identical knobs, similar frames, nothing to suggest what lies behind them. A voice says, choose. You hesitate, of course, but you do choose. Door 1. It opens. Something unpleasant waits on the other side. And as you step through, that voice returns. Why didn't you pick the others? There's a pause. Then it says, because you were meant to choose this. This is the illusion of choice. Not freedom, not agency. Just the carefully crafted appearance of it. Limited choices manipulate you. Not by forcing your hand, but by making you feel like your hand was never forced. The trick isn't control. It's making you believe you weren't controlled at all. Think of a menu at a fast food chain. You think you're deciding between 10 items. But who chose those 10? Who decided what's even on the menu? Your freedom begins and ends within the options you've been offered. And more often than not, the most critical option, the one that would truly change everything, is never listed. Cult leaders are masters of this. They don't chain you to a wall. They hand you a key and say, you're free to leave any time. But every exit is laced with guilt. Every alternative is poisoned with fear. You're not trapped by walls. You're trapped by the illusion that you're free. And when you believe you're free, you stop resisting. The power of limited choices is psychological. It rewires your understanding of autonomy. You feel responsible for decisions you were manipulated into making. You defend those decisions because they feel personal. But they're not. They're engineered. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you made a decision that wasn't already shaped by someone else's framing? Every advertisement you see, every poll you're asked, every vote you cast, it all happens within a predetermined structure. A structure designed not to guide your freedom, but to manage it. This is how control becomes invisible. Imagine a child offered a choice between cleaning their room now or losing screen time. It feels like a decision, but it isn't. But it isn't. It's a forced narrative, dressed as a fair deal. The more subtle the control, the more effective it becomes. Now scale that up to society, to institutions, to politics. You're told you can choose your leaders, but you didn't choose who gets to run. You're told you have a voice, but only within the volume range allowed. This isn't democracy. It's curated permission. And what's worse, you internalize it. Once you start believing your limited options reflect your true desires, manipulation becomes self-sustaining. You repeat the logic you've been handed. You defend your choices, mock alternatives, shame dissent. You become an enforcer of your own boundaries. That's how cults grow. That's how they thrive. They don't restrict all freedom. They narrow it just enough to guide you down one path, then make you grateful for the privilege. You're choosing to stay, after all. You're choosing to comply. And every time you choose within the trap tightens. Because the most powerful form of control doesn't feel like control. It feels like agency. They call it bounded rationality in psychology. The idea that your decisions are always limited by the information you have, the time you're given, and the mental resources you possess. But what happens when all of those are manipulated? When your information is filtered, your time is pressured, and your thoughts are overwhelmed? What kind of choice is left? A choice that isn't free, just dressed up to look like it. And if you try to step outside the boundaries, ask questions that aren't permitted, imagine options that weren't offered, you're labeled difficult, disruptive, unstable. Because the system only works if you keep choosing from the list. So ask yourself this: what choices are you making that aren't really yours? What beliefs have you accepted simply because they were the only ones presented? And who benefits from your limited perception of freedom? The disturbing truth is that most manipulation doesn't feel malicious. It feels benign. It feels normal, and that's what makes it so dangerous. Because you'll never rebel against control you can't even see. You wake up in a place that feels perfect. The lighting is soft. The temperature is ideal. The people smile just enough, not too much to seem fake, but just enough to comfort you. You're told you're part of something special, something meaningful. You're offered a seat at the table, a voice in the room, but only just enough to keep you leaning forward, waiting for more. This is how it begins. Slowly, subtly. The benefits drip slowly. You don't get the whole reward up front. You get a taste, a hint, just enough to make you wonder what's next. That's intentional. It's not just psychological, it's mechanical. Because once you've received a small benefit, your mind locks in. It wants completion, resolution, closure. The unfinished promise keeps you hooked. Ever noticed how cult leaders rarely promise everything all at once? They talk in layers, mysteries, initiations, inner circles. At first you're just a visitor, then a student, then an insider. Each title comes with privileges, each privilege with expectations, and before you realize it, you've invested so much time, energy, and emotion that pulling away feels like failure, like betrayal, like tearing off your own skin. You were manipulated, but gently, carefully, slowly. Think of it like a maze with no exit signs. You take one step, then another, and another. At each turn you're rewarded, not with freedom, but with the illusion of progress. You're not stuck, you're advancing, you're growing, you're becoming. Or so you're told, and the truth is, this strategy doesn't just belong to cults. Marketers use it. Governments use it. Institutions use it. The free trial that turns into a subscription. The policy that promises reform if you're just a little more patient. The job that tells you you're next in line for promotion, just not yet. The same tactic plays out again and again. Deferred reward. Drip-fed validation. You're told the next step is when the real magic happens, that you just haven't reached it yet. That a little more effort, a little more loyalty, a little more sacrifice, and then you'll arrive. But you never do. Because arrival would mean the manipulation ends, and that's bad for business, or faith, or control. So instead, the benefits keep dripping, slowly. This is psychological entrapment at its most elegant. Because once you've tasted a reward, your brain releases dopamine, not for what you have, but for what you might get. And the uncertainty, the anticipation, creates craving. It's not just a hope anymore, it's a need. You find yourself defending the system, making excuses for the delays, rationalizing the red flags. You become complicit in your own manipulation because you need it to be real. The alternative, that you were exploited, is too painful to accept. That's the genius of slow rewards. They mask exploitation as opportunity. Now, imagine you finally get promoted, years after the promise, or you're finally allowed into the inner circle. What do you find? More levels, more promises, more steps. The final reward never existed. It was bait, because the goal was never to fulfill the promise. The goal was to keep you chasing it. This is how devotion is engineered, how identity is reshaped, how free will is replaced with dependency. You think you're in control, you think you're choosing to stay, but you're reacting to a system that's designed to manipulate your basic wiring, designed to give you just enough to keep you quiet, loyal, hopeful. And you tell yourself you're making progress. But you're not climbing, you're circling. You're orbiting a promise that keeps receding. Ask yourself, what would happen if the benefits came all at once? If the mystery vanished, if the rewards were immediate, the illusion would break. There'd be nothing left to chase. And without something to chase, you might finally look around and realize where you actually are. So the benefits must drip slowly, because that's how belief is built. Not through truth, not through reason, but through suspense. Anticipation. Hunger. A hunger that someone else controls. He stands there in silence. Not the silence of indifference, but something far more potent, calculated, intentional. The room is full, yet it's as if time itself has stopped, held hostage by one man's refusal to speak. You lean forward instinctively, caught in the suspense. That deliberate stillness? That's not hesitation. That's power. Cult leaders understand something. Most people never will, that what you don't say can be more persuasive than anything you could. They weaponize the pause, not the kind born of uncertainty, but the kind designed to pull you in. Create tension, build anticipation, and make whatever follows feel like revelation. They don't just speak, they perform. Every word is a beat. Every breath is a moment to build pressure. But the real trick lies in the silence. Because when someone pauses before delivering a message, your brain races to fill the gap. You search for meaning. You project significance. That pause becomes sacred, as if something profound must be coming next. And when it does, you're primed to believe it. No matter how irrational or dangerous, the emotional pause isn't just about timing, it's about control. Think of the courtroom preacher standing before his congregation. He tells a story, not with speed, but with gravity. A slight tremble in his voice, a tear that never quite falls. He stops just before the climax, holds it, lets the silence stretch. The room leans in, not because they want to, but because they need to. The emotion is irresistible. When he finally speaks again, the words are seared into their memory. This isn't intuition, it's architecture. Cult leaders train themselves to recognize emotional cues. They sense the rhythm of a room, the way a musician hears tempo. They know exactly when you're vulnerable, when your resistance is softening, when your need for meaning outweighs your skepticism. That's when the silence strikes. A carefully timed pause, mid-sentence, that makes you question what you thought you knew, because silence feels real, genuine. It mimics emotion, grief, awe, revelation. A pause can make even a lie feel authentic. It adds gravity, and gravity makes people submit. But there's another layer, darker still. The pause creates distance. It elevates the speaker. You wait on them. You hang on their next word. That imbalance turns them into an authority, even a savior. Your subconscious begins to frame them, not as someone who speaks truth, but as someone who embodies it. They don't need to prove their message. Their silence is the proof. And once you've handed over that kind of power, once you've accepted the idea that silence equals depth, you stop analyzing. You start absorbing. You want their next sentence to complete something inside you, and they know it. So they keep pausing. They pause before promises. They pause before threats. They pause before revealing secrets. Only the chosen few get to hear. Each pause is a test of obedience, a tightening of the psychological leash, and every time you lean in, you reinforce the very structure of your own manipulation. But really, you're being conditioned. And here's the most dangerous part. You start using the pause on yourself. You mimic it. You internalize it. You begin to doubt your own instincts. Because if someone who sounds so enlightened, so wise, so emotionally resonant, says something that contradicts your beliefs, and they say it with that pause, maybe you were wrong. Maybe they see something you don't. Maybe this silence is a doorway to a truth you've always missed. But it's not. It's just performance. A manipulation so elegant, it feels like sincerity. So precise. It masquerades as soul. And yet you believe it, because they paused. That pause, it wasn't for effect. It was for you. You wake up one morning with a strong opinion. Maybe it's about politics, religion, health, or morality. It feels right, solid. It fits your worldview and gives you certainty. But how did it get there? Did you build that belief brick by brick, examining each piece of evidence? Or did it slide into place because it just felt right and stayed there because it kept feeling right? This is the seduction of distorted logic. Distorted logic doesn't scream. It whispers. It wears the mask of common sense, of intuition, of gut feeling. It offers you neat conclusions without requiring the discomfort of thinking too deeply. And because it feels easy, because it feels good, you buy into it, even when it's wrong. Now imagine you're in a room with someone charismatic. They speak with conviction. They repeat simple phrases. Their tone is calm, assured. They tell you what you want to hear. They frame complex issues in black and white. Us versus them, good versus evil, safe versus dangerous. And suddenly, your mind starts reorganizing itself, not because they've proven anything, but because they've made you feel something. That's the power of distorted logic. It makes emotional comfort look like intellectual clarity. Cult leaders, propagandists, and manipulators understand this better than anyone. They don't win minds by presenting superior arguments. They bypass the critical brain entirely and go straight for the vulnerable heart. They use cognitive biases like anchoring, confirmation, and the illusion of explanatory depth to trap you in a loop. Take the anchoring effect. Present someone with a baseline idea, no matter how absurd, and everything that follows gets measured against it. Say, the government is hiding the truth, and suddenly every piece of evidence is viewed through that lens. Nothing confirms it. That just means they're hiding it well. Too much evidence, that's overcompensation. You can't win because the anchor already pulled you down. Or consider the false dilemma, framing an issue as either or with no middle ground. Either you're loyal or you're a traitor. Either you're awake or you're a sheep. This tactic polarizes you, forces you to choose a side before you've even thought it through. And because humans crave certainty and belonging, most of us choose quickly, then spend years defending that snap judgment, with false logic layered on top of false logic. Now let's go deeper. Ever heard someone say, "It just makes sense"? That phrase is a warning sign. Often what makes sense isn't what's true, it's what feels true. It's what fits our emotional narrative. Distorted logic thrives in that space where feelings pretend to be facts. And the more emotionally charged the topic, the more likely we are to surrender logic entirely. Think of conspiracy theories. They offer emotional resolution to complex, painful realities. When something horrific happens, it's comforting to believe there's a hidden hand behind it, someone to blame, someone in control. The alternative that chaos, randomness, and human error rule the world is far scarier. So we reach for distorted logic because it calms us. It gives us stories. Stories with villains, with heroes, with neat conclusions. Stories that protect us from the horror of not knowing. But in doing so, we trade truth for certainty. We stop seeking understanding and start defending dogma. And here's where it gets dangerous. Once distorted logic takes root, it grows armor. Confirmation bias ensures you only see evidence that supports your belief. Groupthink ensures that dissenting voices are silenced. Social reinforcement rewards you for echoing the narrative and punishes you for questioning it. Before long, you're not thinking anymore. You're parroting. You're defending beliefs you didn't truly choose in the first place. You might think this could never happen to you, but that's part of the illusion. The more certain you are that your logic is sound, the more vulnerable you are to distortion. Real clarity involves doubt, questions, discomfort. It's slow, painful, messy. Distorted logic is clean, convincing, addictive, and the most haunting part. You rarely know when it's happening. because the moment you're under its spell, it feels like you've finally seen the light. You don't feel manipulated, you feel empowered, certain, right. That's how beliefs become prisons. Not because they're forced upon you, but because you locked yourself inside, smiling, convinced you chose the door. You walk into a room, and without thinking, you straighten your back. You lower your voice. You watch your words, not because someone told you to, but because someone in that room outranks you. That's how deep it goes. That's the silent grip of hierarchy. It doesn't need to shout, and you obey. Hierarchies don't just organize, they indoctrinate. They're sold to us as systems of efficiency, as ways to maintain order. But beneath that tidy surface, they function as machines of psychological control. At the top, a few wield power. Below, everyone else is conditioned to submit, to defer, to fear. And that fear, it doesn't scream, it simmers. It lives in the hesitation before speaking your mind. It hides in the careful phrasing of your emails. It's in the way your heartbeat quickens when your boss calls your name. It's not terror, it's anticipation, the kind that gnaws at your freedom without ever drawing blood. Most people don't even realize how deep the programming goes. From childhood, you're trained to seek approval from authority, teachers, parents, coaches. Your early instincts are rewired. Compliance is praised, disobedience punished. Not violently, but subtly. A look of disapproval, a lower grade, a withheld reward. Bit by bit, your autonomy is shaved away, and you learn to survive, to succeed. You must appease those above you. But here's the sinister brilliance. Hierarchies don't need to enforce fear with punishment. They let you do it to yourself. They make you police your own behavior. Second-guess your decisions. Overthink your tone. The fear becomes internalized. You don't resist because you've forgotten you even could. And it's not just in workplaces or schools. It's everywhere. Governments, religions, corporations, even families. Every rigid hierarchy implants the same virus. Stay in line, know your place, do not question. Now think about cults. Why do people stay, even when the teachings are absurd, the leader abusive, the rules suffocating? Because hierarchies instill fear not through threats, but through identity. They convince you that leaving means exile, not just from a group, but from meaning, from belonging, from self-worth. The higher the leader sits, the more divine they become. The lower you are, the more you rely on their approval just to feel whole. And here's where it turns darker. Hierarchies don't just demand obedience, they reward it with survival. The more you submit, the safer you feel. The system trains you to equate deference with security, and so the fear of breaking rank becomes the fear of annihilation. Not physical death, but social, emotional, existential. You start to believe that questioning authority is dangerous, that challenging the order will bring chaos. You become your own warden, enforcing the hierarchy within your own mind. And even if you do rebel, the structure survives. Because for everyone who questions, 100 still obey. Fear doesn't need to be loud to be effective. In a hierarchy, silence is its sharpest weapon. The quiet shame of speaking out of turn. The social penalty of being labeled difficult. The fear of losing your place, your job, your friends, your reputation. These are the bars of the invisible cage, and most never even rattle them. Ask yourself, how many times have you held back, not because you were wrong, but because someone more important might disagree? How often have you hidden truth to protect your position? That's not strategy, that's fear, a fear hierarchy taught you to feel. And the worst part, Hierarchies reward those who perpetuate the fear. Those who bully from above get promoted. Those who challenge upward get silenced. The system isn't broken. It's functioning exactly as designed to dismantle that fear. You first have to see it. Recognize how deeply it's woven into your behaviors, your thoughts, your instincts. Understand that the hierarchy survives only because you feed it your obedience, drip by drip, day by day. True freedom doesn't come from climbing the ladder. It comes from stepping off entirely. Refusing to mistake fear for respect. Refusing to let position dictate truth. Refusing to participate in a system that survives by teaching you to shrink. Because the moment you stop being afraid of those above you, the moment you stop needing their validation, that's when the hierarchy starts to crumble. Not with a bang, but with the quiet withdrawal of your consent. And that is the most dangerous act of all. You're standing in a group, not part of it, not entirely separate from it, just adjacent. Watching, listening. A little too different to blend in, but not different enough to disappear. And then something goes wrong. Someone messes up. Tension rises. Blame needs to land somewhere. Eyes start shifting. Fingers start pointing. And slowly, inevitably, they turn to you. You weren't even involved. You weren't responsible, but you were convenient. That's how outsider blame shift works. It's not about justice. It's not about truth. It's about emotional equilibrium, restoring the group's sense of control by offloading guilt onto someone who can't or won't fight back. You see it everywhere. In families, it's the black sheep. At work, it's the new hire. In politics, it's the foreigner, the dissident, the outlier. The pattern is ancient. When people feel powerless, they look for a scapegoat, someone they can sacrifice to avoid looking inward. And here's the twisted genius of it. The outsider doesn't even have to be guilty. In fact, it works better when they're not. Their innocence sharpens the edge of their difference. Their lack of defense only proves their isolation. If they were truly one of us, wouldn't someone stand up for them? Wouldn't they fight harder? No, because they don't belong. And because they don't belong, we can make them carry our shame. This trick is more than psychological. It's evolutionary. In ancient tribes, group cohesion meant survival. So anything that threatened unity, conflict, disagreement, failure had to be managed swiftly. And what's swifter than a sacrifice? Cast the blame outward, purge the threat, reset the harmony. Cults take this to terrifying extremes. Every failed prophecy, every broken promise, every act of cruelty must be justified. And when the weight of that dissonance becomes too much, the leader doesn't take responsibility. They point outside, the media, the government, the non-believers, the heretics. It doesn't matter who, as long as they're not us. You start to see how the game is played. First, isolate the outsider, then build a narrative around them. Slowly reshape perception until blame feels obvious, inevitable, righteous. The outsider becomes a symbol, not a person with thoughts and context and nuance, but an idea, a container, a vessel for collective failure. The rest of the group doesn't even feel guilty. They feel relief. They feel cleansed. Blame is heavy. Handing it off feels like freedom. But here's where it gets darker. You don't have to start as the outsider to become one. You can be part of the group, loved, trusted, until the moment you question something, until the moment you break a rule, challenge a belief, hesitate when you're supposed to nod along. Then you're suspect. Then you're different. And that difference becomes distance. And that distance becomes blame. The shift is subtle at first, a joke that feels a little pointed, a task you're suddenly not trusted with, conversations that quiet when you enter the room. You try to rationalize it, try to fix it. But the narrative's already forming. You're becoming the repository, the shadow, the necessary villain, and the most terrifying part. The group believes it, fully, because it feels better than admitting they were wrong, because it restores the illusion of moral cleanliness. This isn't just about cults, it's about families, companies, nations, any structure where identity is collective and doubt is dangerous. The outsider blame shift keeps the illusion alive. The illusion that the group is good, the leader is right, the system is just, even if it means sacrificing someone to maintain it. So what do you do when you see it? When you feel it happening? Most people stay quiet, because speaking up risks contagion. Defending the outsider might make you the next one. The safest move is silence. Complicity. And that's how the cycle continues. The outsider becomes the villain. The group feels righteous, and the truth, messy, complicated, shared, is buried beneath the convenience of a single controllable lie. You might think you'd never participate in something like that you'd never turn on someone just to protect a narrative. But ask yourself, have you ever let someone else take the fall, even when you knew better? It starts small. A rumor you don't correct, a blame you don't challenge, a truth you swallow because it's easier than speaking. And each time, it gets a little easier. Each time, the shift becomes more seamless. Until one day, you realize it's not just that the outsider is blamed, it's that the group needs them to be. You walk into a room full of people, and you feel instantly lost. Not because you're confused, but because everyone's speaking in a language that sounds familiar, yet impenetrable. You hear acronyms, buzzwords, phrases stitched together with meanings you can't quite grasp. There's a rhythm to the words, a cadence, a confidence, but none of it makes sense. You're not dumb, you're just not in the club. This is insider jargon. And it's not just an accident of specialized knowledge. It's a wall, a carefully crafted, almost invisible barrier. A way to separate those who belong from those who don't. Cult leaders know this. Marketers know this. So do politicians, conspiracy theorists, and spiritual gurus. They all understand the power of language, not just to inform, but to exclude, to confuse, to dominate. Because when you don't understand the words being used, something strange happens inside you. You start to feel smaller. You second-guess your instincts. You assume the speaker must know more, must be smarter, must have access to something you don't. And so, rather than question what's being said, you question yourself. This doubt is exactly the point. It's the entry fee to a psychological trap. The more lost you feel, the more eager you become to catch up, to understand, to belong. You start asking questions, not out of curiosity, but desperation, and suddenly you're vulnerable. Jargon creates confusion. Confusion creates dependence. And dependence is the lifeblood of manipulation. When someone starts using terms like vibrational alignment, quantum resonance, or divine download, notice what happens. They sound profound, even scientific. But try asking for clarification, and the answer becomes even murkier. That's not by accident, it's by design. The goal isn't to clarify, it's to mystify. Because once you're mystified, you're primed to surrender. You're more likely to accept instructions without skepticism, to trust the person with the jargon, rather than admit your own ignorance. In a twisted way, their confusing language becomes a sign of authority. This is how cult leaders speak, not to connect, but to construct a hierarchy. Those who understand the language are insiders, enlightened, saved. Those who don't, lost, needy, in need of guidance. The more complex the terminology, the more elite the speaker appears, and the more inferior you feel. And this isn't just spiritual manipulation. Look at corporate culture, medical systems, academic communities. They all have their own flavor of coded speech. And the result is always the same: the creation of psychological dependency. Now think about how this affects your autonomy. When you can't decode the words being thrown at you, your ability to think critically shuts down. You outsource your judgment to the person who gets it. And the scariest part, you might not even realize it's happening. You think you're learning, but what you're really doing is submitting. We're conditioned to associate complex language with intelligence. We forget that real intelligence doesn't hide behind complicated words. It clarifies. It invites understanding. But manipulation thrives on the opposite, on turning language into a puzzle only the speaker can solve. The more confused you are, the more likely you are to follow, to obey, to hand over your skepticism like an offering. But here's the truth: if someone really understood what they were talking about, they wouldn't need to make it sound like magic. They'd explain it clearly. They'd empower you, not bewilder you. So next time you hear someone speaking in phrases that seem just out of reach, pause. Ask yourself, are they trying to illuminate or intimidate? Are they lifting the veil or wrapping it tighter around your eyes? Insider jargon isn't a sign of depth. It's a weapon, a tool of exclusion, a tactic of control. And the moment you recognize that is the moment you start to reclaim your mind. You're in a windowless room. You don't know how long you've been here, but your thoughts are starting to blur. Fluorescent lights hum above, never dimming. There's no clock, no phone, no rhythm of day and night. Just the same stale air and a gently ticking pressure in your skull. They let you sleep, barely. An hour here, 2 there, always interrupted, always insufficient, and slowly you stop thinking clearly. You stop resisting. That's not a dystopian horror story. That's a blueprint used in real life. From military interrogations to cult indoctrinations, sleep deprivation isn't just cruel, it's strategic, because once you're exhausted, you're no longer truly yourself. You become someone else, someone softer, slower, easier to mold. Sleep isn't just rest, it's repair. Your brain uses it to clean out toxins, solidify memories, restore emotional stability. Deny it, and your defenses collapse. Literally, you become more emotionally reactive, more suggestible, more willing to accept what you're told just to make the discomfort stop. Your resistance, psychological, emotional, moral, starts to erode, one sleepless night at a time. Cult leaders know this. That's why many of them structure their indoctrination environments around constant activity, late-night prayers, dawn meditations, irregular schedules. Not because these rituals are spiritually necessary, but because exhaustion disables judgment. You don't argue when you're tired, you obey. You don't think critically. You latch on to certainty. Any certainty, even if it's false. And this isn't limited to cults. Think about corporate culture, hustle glorification, all-nighters, emails at 2 a.m. Sleep is for the weak, right? But who benefits from that belief? The more tired you are, the more you comply. You don't unionize. You don't question company policy. You don't ask why your job is draining the life out of you. You just keep going. Head down, eyes bleary, mind pliable. Sleep deprivation doesn't just make you vulnerable to persuasion, it makes you crave it. Your brain, desperate for stability, starts clinging to simple ideas, authoritative voices, group consensus. You want someone to tell you what to do, what to believe, what to think. You want the discomfort to end, and you'll trade autonomy for comfort without even realizing it. And here's where it gets darker. Once you're broken down by exhaustion, the same hands that denied you rest will offer relief. A structured schedule, a leader's approval, a sense of belonging. You'll feel grateful. You'll believe they saved you from your own collapse, when in truth they orchestrated it. They destabilized you just to take credit for your recovery. This isn't paranoia, it's psychology. Studies show that sleep-deprived individuals are far more likely to believe falsehoods, accept flawed logic, and exhibit impaired moral reasoning. Your internal compass goes haywire, and in those moments, the person guiding you doesn't have to be right. They just have to be confident. Repetition and presence will do the rest. So ask yourself, how much of what you've believed, accepted, or even committed to came from a place of true clarity? And how much came when you were running on empty, overworked, under-rested, emotionally frayed? That's when manipulation slips in, not through force, but fatigue. And here's the final twist. We often don't remember the worst of our sleep-deprived choices. The brain in survival mode doesn't store those moments well, which means you could be shaped by decisions you barely recall making, loyalties you don't remember forming, beliefs implanted while your mind was too tired to fight back. Sleep isn't just a biological necessity, it's psychological armor. Every missed hour weakens your shield. Every sleepless night opens another door to someone else's control. And once that door is open, the hardest part isn't escaping. It's realizing you were ever inside at all. You're stranded in a desert, heat blistering your skin, lips cracked, throat raw. Then out of nowhere, a man appears with a bottle of water. He says he'll give it to you, but only if you bow your head and repeat the words he tells you. You hesitate, but your body doesn't. You kneel, you obey, you survive. That's what salvation looks like when you're desperate. Not divine, not noble, just transactional, conditional. Now replace the desert with despair. Replace the water with meaning. And replace the man with someone who promises to save you, not from heat, but from confusion, from chaos, from a world that doesn't care. A cult leader doesn't offer salvation. They offer relief. And relief is addictive. This is the secret. Salvation isn't just the bait, it's the leash. The promise of being saved, of being chosen, of being part of something greater. It doesn't just comfort you, it traps you. Because once you believe someone can save you, you start to believe you owe them something. Loyalty, devotion, silence, and it begins subtly. You're told you're special, not like the others, that only you understand the truth, that everyone else is asleep, blind, corrupted. It's intoxicating, not because it makes you better, but because it makes you belong. But here's the twist. Salvation always comes with terms. You must follow the teachings, attend the meetings, distance yourself from the outside world, abandon doubt. Questioning is framed as betrayal. Skepticism becomes sin, and all the while, the promise of salvation dangles in front of you, like a carrot you'll never quite reach. You think you're climbing toward truth, but you're being trained. The rules get more rigid, the rituals more bizarre, the leader more erratic. But by now, you're invested. You've sacrificed relationships, money, autonomy. You've told yourself it's worth it, that the path is hard because it's righteous, that obedience is a test of faith, not a symptom of control, and so you comply. Not because you're weak, but because you're hopeful. That's the trap. Cults don't thrive on control, they thrive on hope, on the illusion that the pain will end, that enlightenment is coming, that suffering has a purpose. And the longer you wait, the more you suffer, the more you believe you must be getting closer. You can't leave now, not after everything. And they know that, the leader, the inner circle, they see your compliance as a currency, a sign that the promise is working, so they double down. The punishments become more severe, the praise more conditional, You are always one step away from salvation. But only if you do exactly what you're told. It's the oldest cobble in human history. Convince someone that salvation is just out of reach, and they'll run forever. You think you're free because you chose this. But what you really chose was hope over freedom, comfort over truth, the idea of being saved over the reality of saving yourself. And when it finally cracks, when something feels too wrong, too cruel, too far, you'll hesitate. Because to walk away means admitting it was never real, that the promise of salvation was a mask, that your suffering was meaningless. But here's the brutal truth. Compliance doesn't earn salvation, it prolongs delusion. And those who promise to save you, they need your belief more than you need their blessing. Because without your devotion, they're just people. Not prophets, not messiahs, just manipulators with microphones. Salvation, real salvation, doesn't ask for obedience. It asks for awakening. The difference, the other sets you free.